Wow! On the frozen lake, Rinji strikes the ice with an ice hammer. Faintly, he sees a catfish frozen in the ice. Rinji's mouth waters uncontrollably, and he decides that this fish will be dinner for him and Akio today. Akio is a partner he has known for 14 years, having supported each other for 8 years during the apocalypse. He is arguably the person he trusts most in this life. This time, it was his turn to find food, while Akio was responsible for guarding the surroundings. Suddenly, an imperceptible sound echoed through the howling cold wind. Huh? Rinji's pupils contracted sharply. A piercing pain came from his back. Rinji fell to the ground, the ice hammer slipping from his hand. How could someone get so close without Akio giving a warning? He turned his head with difficulty, only to see Akio standing beside his former nemesis, Hiroshi, whispering something with a sly, fawning expression. Faintly, words like space, he doesn't deserve it, and shelter drifted through the wind. In that instant, Rinji's brain worked faster than ever before. Akio had actually betrayed him. Blood drained from Rinji's body, and he felt increasingly cold. But compared to the physical pain and the freezing temperature, what he found harder to accept and what chilled his heart more was being betrayed by the person he trusted the most. The two walked toward Rinji. Hiroshi looked down at Rinji, his eyes filled with undisguised contempt. "Rinji, you've fallen into my hands." Rinji bit his lip until it bled, staring intently at Akio. He had lost all feeling below his waist. All of this was brought upon him by his good brother and partner. Akio found it hard to look into Rinji's blood-red eyes and said evasively, "Rinji, don't blame me. The fact that the space could be opened was partly thanks to me, but you always treated it as your own property, refusing to take it out so we could go to the shelter together. We will join young Master Hiroshi, and from now on the space will serve him so we won't have to work so hard to find supplies ourselves. I am doing this for your own good. The apocalypse is getting more and more dangerous." Rinji had an ancestral cracked bowl, a memento left by his father. Even after the apocalypse arrived, Rinji carried it with him at all times. Once, while Rinji and Akio were looking for supplies, they accidentally dug up an ancient coin. They thought it was useless, but unexpectedly, after Rinji picked up the coin, it activated the bowl, allowing Rinji to obtain a personal space, worry not about scarcity, but about inequality. From that day on, Akio's attitude underwent a subtle change, while Rinji remained immersed in the difficult task of trying to figure out how to keep them both fed. He hadn't noticed Akio's change at all. 8 years! 8 whole years! Rinji suddenly felt it was ridiculous. You actually betrayed me because of this? Ha 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 ha! Rinji, his mouth full of blood, laughed like a madman. Akio knew full well that Hiroshi was one of the people he hated most in his life. They had supported each other for 8 years, never leaving each other's side. Yet they drifted apart because of a space that had only been awakened for less than half a year. So this is what the innocent are guilty for holding a jade means. After laughing, Rinji closed his eyes heavily, then opened them, saying with certainty to Hiroshi, "I can work for you, but Akio is useless now, right?" Akio opened his mouth slightly, seemingly realizing something, his eyes filled with terror. He turned to look at Hiroshi. "Young Master Hiroshi, you wouldn't," Rinji added, twisting the knife. "If he tells you, he will tell others. My space has nothing to do with him. Having one more person who knows about it is just one more risk of it being leaked." At this moment, Rinji's eyes were bloodshot, and his gaze was terrifyingly deep. Even though he should have been in a pathetic state, there was still a smile on his face that made people feel a chill down their spines when they looked at him. Akio looked at Rinji, a flicker of fear and resentment flashing in his eyes. He squeezed out a smile, uglier than crying, and said to Hiroshi, "Young Master Hiroshi, I was the one who provided you with the information about the space, right? I can help you watch over Rinji." "Yes, you have indeed made a contribution," Hiroshi agreed, nodding. The smile on Akio's face became genuine. "Your contribution I will always keep in mind." Akio's pupils shrank, his body trembling slightly. He still wanted to say something, but Hiroshi had already pressed a gun to his head. He had never intended to let Akio live. Red and white matter exploded from the back of Akio's head. Swish! No sooner said than done! Taking advantage of the moment Hiroshi turned the gun barrel to blow Akio's head off, Rinji used all his strength to prop himself up with one arm, holding a sharp piece of ice in the other. He threw it hard at Hiroshi. Whether it was divine favor or not, Rinji hit Hiroshi directly in the head. Hiroshi's body fell into the ice, and the gun slipped from his hand, landing 1 meter in front of Rinji. Rinji crawled desperately toward the handgun. Closer, even closer. The previous hit wasn't enough to be fatal. He had to kill Hiroshi. A towering hatred flashed in Rinji's eyes. A flash of joy crossed his eyes. A sharp pain hit the back of his head, and his consciousness sank into darkness. Beep, 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 beep. Rinji sat up abruptly, gasping for air. Didn't he just die? Was there a fourth person on the scene? Only then did Rinji realize that his injuries had vanished. And the warmth in the surroundings, the soft bed, these were things that shouldn't exist in the extreme cold of the apocalypse. At this moment, the piercing beeping continued, and the stunned Rinji saw the phone on his bedside table. A phone? A phone that had been broken since the beginning of the apocalypse? It took Rinji a long time to calm down and confirm that he had been reborn. He had been reborn back to before the extreme cold apocalypse. Back to before the extreme cold apocalypse began. The time now was March 1st, 2024 at 7:30 a.m. At this time, he was only 19 years old, a freshman at a local university. He didn't live in the dormitory, but at home. Rinji stood on his bedroom balcony, feeling the cool morning breeze. The morning sun in March also carried warmth. Looking down from the 28th floor balcony, he could see the heavy traffic on the road outside the residential complex, which would soon start to become congested. But such peaceful and prosperous scenes would soon be replaced by vast white snow, never to be seen again. The cause lay in that sun hanging high in the sky at this moment. Rinji reached out to shield his eyes, looking at the sun, the one humanity relied on for survival, out of the corner of his eye. Perhaps humanity never imagined that if one day the sun developed problems. Rinji, however, knew that it would be a disaster, the end of the world for humanity. 3 months later, on June 1st, a SSS-class solar flare, unprecedented in human scientific history, would erupt. This was the time calculated by scientists after the apocalypse had arrived. Because the solar flare erupted so suddenly, it wasn't predicted in advance. By the time the solar particles were about to reach Blue Star, only then did Russian scientists discover the anomaly. That was already June 3rd. It gave humanity only one day to react, even before governments could reach a consensus. On June 4th at 10 a.m., a violent electromagnetic pulse would destroy all satellites outside Blue Star, without exception. All electronic equipment would malfunction. Following that, the geomagnetic storm sweeping the globe would arrive. The electricity that humanity had taken centuries to popularize would be destroyed in an instant, and they would return to a dark, primitive society. And that was not the scariest part. After the sun erupted, it seemed to enter a period of weakness, and this giant fireball that humanity relied on for survival would visibly dim. The world would fall into an average temperature of -50 degrees Celsius within 3 days. The entire Blue Star would be frozen, entering an extreme cold apocalypse. Over 90% of species would face extinction. Animals, plants, food, and shorter buildings would all be frozen under the blizzard and ice sheets. Humanity would face an unprecedented racial catastrophe. From that moment on, those who wanted to survive would face a difficult path. Rinji returned to his room, thought for a moment, opened the safe, and took out an unremarkable bowl. This bowl had an uneven surface, a dull, grayish color, and a chip on the edge. If you took it to the street and squatted down, you could beg right then and there. Originally, Rinji found it strange that his father had made a special will for a broken bowl. But since activating this bowl and obtaining a space, Rinji realized its uniqueness. This was a treasure basin. It required specific things to be opened, or rather repaired. In his previous life, it was only by sheer coincidence, in the 8th year of the extreme cold apocalypse, that he managed to repair the treasure basin and gain the space. Unfortunately, at that time, the supplies found were not even enough to fill his stomach. What was most important after the apocalypse arrived? Supplies! Supplies that could be carried with him so they wouldn't be stolen. The first thing he had to do now was to open this treasure basin. The item to open the treasure basin was something he had found in his previous life at the antique market in the south of the city. The sooner, the better. That item concerned his greatest asset after his rebirth, so Rinji decided to leave immediately. He found a backpack, put the treasure basin inside, and when he went downstairs and saw a breakfast shop, Rinji remembered he hadn't eaten breakfast. He had grown accustomed to hunger in the apocalypse, often unable to find food for 2 or 3 days, having to eat snow to survive. Rinji walked into the breakfast shop and devoured a hearty breakfast. After eating, guided by his memories from his previous life and navigation assistance, he drove to the antique flea market in the south of the city. Early in the morning, hundreds of stalls were set up along the antique market street, crowded with people. In his previous life, it was here that he and Akio dug up the key item to repair the treasure basin. an ancient coin with a special pattern. In his previous life, that ancient coin was dug out from under thick snow. Rinji could only be certain it was in this antique market, but the specific location was no longer identifiable, so he had to search one by one. The most common things in the antique market were ancient coins. Almost every stall had them, and they were in piles of hundreds. After searching for 2 hours, Rinji still hadn't found the ancient coin with the special pattern. His expression was serious. He had just inquired, and this antique market only gathered for stalls on weekend mornings. And the stall owners who came each time were not fixed. This was undoubtedly bad news. If the stall owner who owned that special ancient coin only set up a stall there on the day of the apocalypse, wouldn't he have to wait 3 months to look for it? That would significantly reduce the advantage of his rebirth. In another hour or two, the stalls on this street would close, and if he couldn't find it, he would have to come back next weekend to try his luck. Exhaling, Rinji calmed himself and continued to search toward the next stall. "Rinji?" A familiar voice sounded from behind him. Rinji raised his eyelids, a flash of murderous intent in his clear eyes. Rinji would never forget this voice in his dreams. Akio, his classmate and friend from junior high to high school, who had betrayed him after 8 years of hardships in the apocalypse. Suppressing the killing intent in his eyes, Rinji turned around and said suspiciously, "Akio, what are you doing here?" Akio, wearing a city management uniform, came up and patted Rinji on the shoulder. "I should be the one asking you that. Why? Does our class top student want to play with antiques?" Akio said teasingly, looking at the handsome Rinji in his expensive clothing, a flicker of undetectable jealousy flashing in his eyes. Rinji, who had lived an extra life more than Akio, captured this flash of envy, cold light appearing in his eyes. So it was at this time in his previous life that Akio already had dissatisfaction with him. Akio was a temporary worker in the city management bureau, so his appearance here was not strange. He calmly brushed Akio's hand off his shoulder and said casually, "Nothing to do on the weekend. I heard there are many antiques here, so I came to take a look." Akio sneered inwardly. He had been working in the vicinity for almost a year and knew that the street was full of scam items. Many people came here with the idea of picking up a bargain, but even one who could really pick up a bargain didn't appear once a year. Last time, a fool was scammed out of more than 100,000 and came to make a scene. However, he wouldn't tell Rinji any of this. He hoped Rinji would get scammed. Anyway, money wasn't an issue for Rinji. He still had to maintain a superficial relationship. Otherwise, how could he pit this wealthy mark, Rinji? Akio smiled and said, "There are many fakes here, and some real ones too. Half a year ago, an old man picked up a genuine Han Dynasty item here for 200 and sold it for 500,000. A normal 19-year-old hearing this would be hot-headed, and even those who were just looking around would want to buy a few pieces to try. Rinji showed nothing on his face, but sneered internally. How come he didn't realize Akio was this insidious before? He nodded at Akio. Then I must take a good look. Just then, a commotion broke out not far away. Many people gathered around. Driven by curiosity, Rinji walked over too. Seeing the crowd blocking the way, Akio shouted, "Make way! Make way! City management is working!" The crowd indeed cleared a path. Rinji took the opportunity to walk to the front. A 25 or 26-year-old young man looked excited, holding an ancient coin and shouting, "Old man, I took it for appraisal yesterday, and this is just a modern handicraft. It's fake. You actually sold it to me for 100,000. Give me my money back. I need a refund today." The stall owner was an old man in his 70s, wearing rough cloth clothes, the wrinkles on his face now bunched together. "This really is a treasure passed down in my family. What kind of broken treasure? Are you giving me a refund or not? If you don't refund my money, I'm going to call the police." The bystanders were all watching the show, including Akio, who leaned into Rinji's ear and said, "This kind of thing happens here every few months. In the past, this kid would have been beaten up." There is a rule in the antique business. Once an item is bought, it cannot be returned even if it is a forgery. Being cheated is a sign of lack of skill, and spending money is considered a lesson learned. This young man didn't know if he was truly ignorant or just pretending, insisting on a return. Rinji saw the ancient coin in the young man's hand, and his pupils contracted sharply. It was the ancient coin that opened the treasure basin. The old man, with shaking hands, said with a bitter look, "This is really my ancestral piece. It's been in the family since my grandfather's grandfather." "Young man, I didn't lie to you." Many people in the crowd looked at the young man with unkind eyes. Was this guy really ignorant of the rules? At the same time, some felt the old man was acting quite realistically. If it had been taken for an appraisal, could the real thing be appraised as fake? Rinji took a deep breath, walked up to the young man and asked with curiosity, "Can you let me see the ancient coin in your hand?" Kenji saw the person was a student younger than him and waved his hand impatiently. Go away, go play somewhere else." Rinji wasn't annoyed and said, "I like to collect different coins. I'm interested in the coin you have. Can you sell it to me?" Once these words were spoken, a whisper spread among the people around. Is this kid a fool? It's clearly fake and he still wants to buy it. Is this still a student? Does he have that much money? Akio was also taken aback, not knowing why Rinji would want to buy something he knew was fake. He knew Rinji was very wealthy, 100,000. That was what he would earn in 3 years as a city management officer without eating or drinking. With this money, why not give it to him instead of buying this broken copper coin? Akio, standing behind Rinji, flashed a look of jealousy and hatred in his eyes. Why, being the same age, was Rinji's life so much better than his? When Kenji heard that Rinji was willing to take it, his eyes lit up, and he immediately handed the ancient coin to Rinji. It was an ancient coin that seemed like gold, but wasn't, with a golden ingot carved on one side and some strange characters and patterns on the other. Many people leaned in to look, then shook their heads and backed away. Most of the people in the crowd were those who had been looking for opportunities to pick up bargains in the antique market for years, and they had some eye for it too. This ancient coin was brand new in condition, and the pattern did not resemble the currency of any known dynasty. It looked like a copper coin that a child would use to play at a game arcade. Everyone looked at Rinji as if they were looking at a fool with more money than sense. An old man kindly warned him, "Young man, you need to look carefully when buying items." Feeling the heat radiating from the treasure basin in his backpack, Rinji confirmed that this was exactly what he was looking for. Regardless of whether this ancient coin was valuable or not, the ability to open a storage space made it priceless to him. Rinji asked casually, "How much do you want for it?" Kenji's eyes darted around, sizing up Rinji's attire. 150,000 and it's yours." He had just been arguing for a refund, but now that Rinji wanted to buy it, he hiked up the price, drawing looks of contempt from those around. Rinji did not respond. Kenji grabbed the coin back, shouting, "I bought this for 100,000. What are you dreaming about?" Rinji smiled and turned to leave. He counted to 3 in his heart, certain the man would call him back. Indeed, before he had walked 2 steps, someone stopped him, but it wasn't Kenji. It was the old man who had set up the stall. "Young man, if you want this kind of ancient coin, I have another one here. I'll sell it to you for 80,000. Rinji turned around in surprise. "You have another one?" The old man tremblingly pulled a cloth bundle from his chest, took out the other ancient coin and handed it to Rinji with hope. He was in desperate need of money. His son had leukemia. Otherwise, he would never have sold this family heirloom. His ancestors had instructed that the 2 ancient coins must never be lost. But if he didn't sell them now, his family line would end. Selling these 2 coins would cover his son's surgery fees. Rinji took the coin, looking down to hide his shock and delight. They were indeed identical. The treasure basin reacted as well. He hadn't expected there to be 2 of these coins. "Old man, how many more of these coins do you have?" Rinji asked. "Only these 2, they are ancestral. If it weren't for the urgent need for money, I wouldn't be selling them." The old man sighed. This answer was within expectations. There couldn't be many of such special coins. The one in his hand was likely the same one he had found in his previous life. The one in Kenji's hand was the one that had gone undiscovered before. "All right, I'll take this one." Rinji nodded at the old man and pulled out his phone to transfer the money. Seeing that Rinji had paid so readily, Kenji looked closely at the coin in his hand, wondering if there was some secret to it. The old man happily packed up his stall after selling the coin. Rinji saw Kenji's expression and knew he was suspicious. He was determined to get that second coin. But from their previous exchange, he knew Kenji was a greedy person. If he discovered the truth, he would surely hike up the price or refuse to sell it altogether. Therefore, after finishing the transfer to the old man, Rinji turned and walked away, acting as if he had no interest in the coin in Kenji's hand. This panicked Kenji, who had been waiting for Rinji to show his hand. Ultimately, choosing to believe in his own greed, he rushed to intercept Rinji. "Hey, look, why don't you take the one I have too?" Rinji said unhappily, "I already have one now. The one in your hand isn't of much value to me." Kenji glanced at the old man, who was about to leave, and didn't bother him further. He knew the chances of a refund were slim. After all, the rules of the antique world were clear. He had only tried to act shameless because he was young. He hurriedly said, I'll sell it to you for 100,000. That's what I paid for it. I'm not making a profit, okay? Renji glanced at him coldly and said, 50,000. Finally, after some haggling, Renji bought the second coin from Kenji for 80,000. Looking at the two coins in his palm, Renji wore a faint smile. If he hadn't come today, he would have missed this coin. He couldn't wait to see what changes would occur to the treasure basin in this lifetime. After brushing off Akio, who was green with envy, Renji hurried home. Akio would be dealt with sooner or later, but not now. Back home, Renji locked the door, walked into the windowless storage room, and closed that door as well. The process of opening the treasure basin would be significant. He couldn't let anyone see anything unusual. He took out the slightly warmed treasure basin. Renji first placed one ancient coin into it. The treasure basin hovered, suddenly emitting a dazzling light. The grime and patina on its surface peeled away, revealing the basin's true appearance. Then, it turned into a golden light and flew into Renji's forehead. Renji's vision blurred, and a game-like interface appeared. Function: storage space 333. Money points required for upgrade 1,000. The space unit is in meters. The space had appeared. In his previous life, when he opened the treasure basin, this digitized interface also appeared. At that time, Renji hadn't figured out what it meant, so this time he wouldn't waste time studying it. Existence implies purpose. Upon obtaining the space, Renji clenched his fists, unable to hide his joy. The size of the space was equivalent to a small room. Except for living things, anything that fit could be stored or retrieved with his mind. Time in the space stood still, and items placed inside retained the state they were in when stored. Most importantly, this space could be upgraded using gold and silver jewelry. In his previous life, Renji had tried using gold and silver to upgrade the space. Unfortunately, by the 8th year of the apocalypse, these items were buried under thick snow, and he hadn't even finished the first upgrade. He wondered if having an extra coin would cause other changes to the treasure basin. Renji picked up the second coin and placed it against his forehead. He felt a heat at his brow, and the coin disappeared. The treasure basin interface before his eyes became scrambled and blurry, as if hit by garbled code. A moment later, the display cleared, and it had indeed undergone a massive change. Treasure basin. Function: storage space 333. Money points required for upgrade 1,000. Function: item replication 3. Money points required for upgrade 10,000. An item replication function. Renji's eyes lit up. Was it the replication he was thinking of? He immediately prepared to test it. There were only 3 replication attempts, so he couldn't waste them. After thinking for a moment, Renji went back to the bedroom, opened the safe, and took out the most valuable things in the house. 500 grams gold bars left by his father. He held them in his hand and whispered, "Item replication." A flash of golden light occurred before him. The next second, 5 gold bars appeared out of thin air, falling from mid-air and hitting the floor with a crisp sound. Renji immediately squatted down to pick them up and laid them on the table, one by one, comparing them to the original gold bars. The size and weight of the 5 replicated bars were identical to the original ones. Even a small flaw on one of the bars was perfectly reproduced. Renji looked at the treasure basin interface. The item replication column had updated. The current international gold price was 430 yen per gram, and the pawn shop recovery price would be 10 yen lower than the market price. The gold bars he had were left by his father. The 5 bars could now be sold for 1.05 million. Through item replication, this treasure basin had increased his assets by 1.05 million instantly. Treasure basin. This is a real treasure basin, Renji muttered. This god-defying ability to accumulate wealth was definitely the legendary treasure basin. In Japan, there was a legend about a treasure basin, with various versions. The most famous one was about a man named Shin Emon. Legend has it that Shin Emon accidentally obtained a treasure basin. He could put anything into it and get a full basin back. Because of this, Shin Emon became a famous wealthy man in the Edo period. His wealth was said to be on par with the entire country. If his treasure basin had no limit on replication, becoming fabulously wealthy was just a matter of time. Was this its final form? Renji stared quietly at the 10 gold bars, calming his burning heart. Although he knew that repeating the replication could turn his 10 gold bars into 20. The replication count on the interface was down to 2. He didn't know if the total of 3 was a permanent limit or if it could be replenished. If it were only 3 uses, he had to save the remaining 2 for a more critical moment. It was rumored that Shin Emon attracted the suspicion of the shogun because of his massive wealth, and the man died as a result. The innocent are guilty for holding a jade. If he suddenly had so much wealth, it was very likely he would be targeted by the government. Thinking of this, Rinji decided to use the 5 replicated gold bars to upgrade the treasure basin. He picked up one and mentally commanded, "Upgrade space." A red warning flashed on the treasure basin interface. Replicated items cannot be used for upgrades. It couldn't be used for upgrades? Rinji carefully examined the gold bar, which was indistinguishable from an ordinary one. Confirmed there were no loopholes to exploit, Rinji felt slightly disappointed. But this made sense. He picked up the original gold bar he had taken from the safe and commanded, "Upgrade space." The numbers on the interface jumped, becoming function, storage space 333. Money points required for upgrade, 500. Function, item replication 2, money points required for upgrade, 10,000. A 500 grams gold bar could be exchanged for 500 money points. 1 gram of gold equals 1 money point. This was something Rinji knew from his previous life. If it were silver, 100 grams was needed to exchange for 1 money point. Rinji consumed another gold bar, the interface blurred, and the space upgraded. Treasure basin. Function, storage space 666. Money points required for upgrade, 2,000. Function, item replication 2, money points required for upgrade, 10,000. The space had grown. Even though the number only doubled, the volume was now 8 times larger than before. And the money points required for upgrading had also doubled. 2 gold bars worth 420,000 were gone just like that. If this were him 3 years ago, he wouldn't even have had the qualifications to upgrade the treasure basin. 3 years ago, Rinji's father died in an accident, leaving behind an inheritance and a high death compensation of 10 million. The treasure basin was what his father had left him. His assets now, excluding the house and these gold bars, included 14.52 million in cash. This amount was nothing in a wealthy city like Tokyo, but for a 19-year-old, it was already a huge sum. For Rinji, this money was far from enough. Upgrading the space to the next level would require 4 gold bars, which converted to 860,000 in cash, and upgrading the item replication function would require 4.24 million. He still needed to hoard many supplies and build a shelter, which also required a lot of money. Rinji thought for a while and had some ideas. He pulled out his phone and found several phone numbers for real estate agents, and called them one by one. First, Rinji wanted to sell his house near the city center. Experience from his previous life told Rinji that in the extreme cold apocalypse, these high-rise residential buildings were not suitable for living. Tokyo was flat, economically prosperous, and crowded with high-rise buildings. However, this wouldn't allow the city's tens of millions of people to survive. Most architecture was designed for heat dissipation, with average cold protection. As a result, when the apocalypse arrived, 9 out of 10 people in cities would freeze to death. The extreme cold apocalypse would arrive in June. Tokyo's average temperature would drop sharply from 27 degrees to -50 or -80. Those steel and concrete high-rise buildings would deform and crack under extreme freezing, and the beautiful, light-filled glass windows would be destroyed by blizzards. In just a year or two, most of these high-rise buildings would tilt or collapse. Some people didn't die from the cold, but from the collapsing buildings. In his previous life, Rinji's building didn't collapse, but the one next to it did, dragging his down with it. Luckily, Rinji had discovered it in advance and escaped. In this life, he naturally couldn't stay there. This house was in a great location, near the city center. Over the past decade, property prices in Japan had skyrocketed, and Tokyo's prices had remained high. Even for this 128 square meter old apartment of Rinji's, the price had reached a high of 80,000 per square meter, meaning it was worth over 10 million. Rinji had only 2 requirements for selling the house: fast transaction and full payment. These 2 requirements seemed difficult, but Tokyo was not lacking in wealthy people. The bottom line price Rinji gave was 9 million, and he clearly stated that he had contacted multiple agencies. He didn't care for how much they sold it, he only wanted 9 million. Whoever had the ability to sell it sooner would get the excess as a commission. These agents would pull out all the stops to sell the house for the high commission. Although time was tight, even if they only sold it for 9.1 million, they could get 100,000. Upon receiving the information, these agents were already speculating in their hearts if Rinji was some kind of wealthy, spendthrift, second-generation heir. Even if the house was cheap, it still required time to sell, So this was the first thing Rinji had to do. The more money he had for his next plan, the better. The next step: use all his assets to buy gold bars from the bank. Use the replication skill to double them. Then sell the replicated bars back to the bank to recover the principal. The remaining gold bars could then all be used to upgrade the treasure basin. After putting his house on the market, Rinji called his counselor to say he had an emergency at home and needed to take time off. The apocalypse was coming. Continuing to go to school was just a waste of time. But if he didn't show up, he would be bombarded with phone calls from the counselor. So asking for leave was more convenient. Anyway, he was on his own, so no one would know if the reason for his leave was fake. Rinji had considered whether he should notify the government about the SSS-class solar flare that would erupt in 3 months. That way, human casualties and national losses might be minimized. But he immediately rejected this idea. Not to mention how a commoner like him would even contact high-level officials. The police officers wouldn't believe what he said either. He had no way to prove what he said was true and would only be treated as a madman by the police. Posting news about the apocalypse online would also be useless. Over the past few years, the climate and environment had become increasingly worse, and many people had already guessed there would be various apocalypses. Even if he spoke with certainty, he would just be treated as one of the many people worrying about nothing. It would only bring him hidden dangers. In the end, he was just a selfish mortal. Rinji drove to a pawn shop. The gold bars in his safe were all bought by his father at a jewelry store over a decade ago, so they could only be sold to jewelry stores and pawn shops. After selling the 5 replicated gold bars, 1.05 million was credited to his card. After finishing this, the sky had turned dark. After eating grilled fish outside, Rinji returned home, satisfied. That night, Rinji also made a fitness plan for the next 3 months. When the extreme cold apocalypse arrives, it is the elderly and children who die the most. Healthy young people have the highest survival rate. A strong body can withstand cold, increase the chance of survival, protect himself, and cope with the mutations that appear after the apocalypse. Just as he finished writing the plan, his phone chimed. Rinji opened his phone to see a message from his high school classmate group chat. It was a small group of only 6 people, and Rinji had pinned this group, which showed how important it was to his past self. The top message was clearly from Akio. Akio, guys, are you free tomorrow night? Let's get together? Everyone, Taro, I'm free. Where are we going? Brother Rin will fly us. Akio, let's go to the Shinjuku Club. I'll spend my salary from the past few months to treat you all to a good meal, because you are my best brothers. Jiro, Brother Akio is impressive, but I'm not in Tokyo these days. Sakura, I'm going. Akio, Sakura, that kind of place isn't suitable for girls. Hana, Sai, I'm at university in Kyoto. Enjoy your meal. Let's get together again during the summer vacation. Rinji looked at the messages and remembered many details he hadn't noticed in his previous life. In his previous life, although Rinji and Akio were junior high classmates, Akio always had his own small clique and was only on nodding terms with Rinji. Now that he thought about it, the change in Akio's attitude happened right when Rinji's father passed away. At that time, his father's sky-high death compensation made the news in Tokyo. After that, Akio and the group he was close to started acting like brothers with Rinji. They would often use various excuses to ask Rinji to go out for food and entertainment. Rinji, considering they were all students with no money, would scramble to pick up the tab. Looking back now, over the 3+ years they spent together, they had consumed hundreds of times, and these people had never paid a single bill. Especially Kinji, who was crying poor and playing the victim to Rinji both openly and covertly. He kept indoctrinating Rinji with the idea that brothers should share in both blessings and hardships. He said he was the one treating everyone, but he would definitely find a way to make Rinji pay the bill when the time came. The cost of the Shinjuku Club was certainly not something Kinji could afford on his 3,000 yen monthly salary. After his rebirth, Rinji was no longer the naive Rinji from his previous life, and he understood these matters as soon as he thought about them. It seemed that today's business of buying ancient coins had triggered Kenji, and he was eager to rip Rinji off. Seeing that Rinji hadn't replied to the messages, several people in the group chat started tagging him. Rinji's mouth curled into a cold sneer. Since that was the case, he might as well collect some interest first. Rinji, sure, but I'm only free after 8 in the evening. The next day, accustomed to waking up early, Rinji woke up naturally at 5 a.m. The treasure basin interface had not changed, and the consumed item replication hadn't been restored either. Rinji was not panicked in the slightest. If it could only be used 3 times, then the new ability provided by this ancient coin was far less practical than the space. Moreover, the money points required to upgrade the item replication ability were 10 times that of the space. This proved that this ability must be even more precious and powerful. He stopped overthinking. Once he used gold to upgrade, everything would become clear. After washing up, Rinji went downstairs for a morning run to warm up, and then began to exercise his entire body in an orderly manner. He didn't engage in continuous, strenuous exercise, but rather worked out with a balance of tension and relaxation. Stretching, training, and stretching again. While enhancing muscle strength, it also kept his muscles and joints more flexible. In the apocalypse, he had already perfected a training method best suited for himself, and now he only needed to follow it progressively. The training intensity for the first day shouldn't be too high. Rinji returned home at 8 o'clock. After a shower and breakfast, Rinji began to make a supply list. The extreme cold apocalypse required many things. Following his experience from the previous life, Rinji listed everything he would need. In the afternoon, Rinji called an agent and rented a 1,000 square meter warehouse for 1 month, with a 1-month deposit plus 1 month's rent totaling 60,000. After agreeing to sign the contract the next day, Rinji hung up the phone. The warehouse was intended to avoid suspicion, and later, the supplies he purchased would be delivered to the warehouse first. There was a small security guard cubicle inside the warehouse. Rinji had made up his mind to move into the warehouse in a few days until all the supplies were prepared. Night fell in the blink of an eye, and Kenji and the others in the chat group were already clamoring to head out early. Rinji was not in a hurry. He didn't change his clothes and drive to the Shinjuku Club until close to 8 o'clock. When Rinji arrived, Kenji, Taro, and Sakura had already had plenty to drink in the private room. Sakura's eyes lit up when she saw Rinji push the door open. Her face flushed as she walked up to hold Rinji's arm and said coquettishly, "Rinji, why are you so slow? It's been a long time. Did you miss me?" Sakura was sweet-looking with fair skin and big, blinking eyes. When she looked at someone, she made them feel like she had eyes only for them, creating the illusion that she was interested in them. In reality, she was like that with everyone in her pond. In his previous life, during the apocalypse, Sakura had survived much better than he had. Rinji gestured to the others, and Sakura was stunned. Before she could ponder Rinji's difference today, Taro had already called Rinji over. "Brother Rin, come here quickly! We must drink until we drop today." Kenji's gaze swept across the arm Sakura had held, and the smile on his face dimmed visibly. "Rinji, Taro, I've prepared a great show for you today." Kenji smiled mysteriously. Taro asked curiously, "What kind of great show?" A moment later, 4 hot women with fiery bodies walked into the room. Rinji raised an eyebrow, a flash of irony in his eyes. He actually called for hostesses. They played quite wildly despite being ugly. Rinji scanned the drinks on the table. They cost at least 10,000 to 20,000. He wanted to see if Kenji could come up with that much money today. Kenji looked at Rinji and smiled. "Rinji, I called these for you and Taro. Thank you for being my brothers, Kenji. Come, let's finish this cup." Rinji didn't take the glass, but said, "I have a bit of a cold today. I took some Sifixime I can't drink." "You guys drink." Hearing this, the 3 of them didn't care. Next, the 3 of them sang and drank in the room. Time flew to 1 a.m., and the table was covered in empty bottles. Except for Rinji, everyone was a bit tipsy. Sakura drunkenly expressed that she wanted to go home. Kenji immediately offered to take her home. Taro's eyes rolled, and he followed suit. "I'm going the same way as Brother Kenji. Let's go together." "Then let's settle the bill and leave together," Rinji said with a smile. The waiter went to get the bill. Kenji walked up to Rinji and draped an arm over his shoulder, his eyes blurred but with a touch of shrewdness. "Rinji, come to my house for dinner tomorrow. My parents miss you very much. Have you considered my mom's proposal to adopt you as her godson last time?" Rinji recalled the matter for a few seconds before he remembered. When he went to Kenji's house last month, Kenji's parents expressed strong affection for Rinji, proposing that Rinji become their godson so they could all be one family. Rinji's father had moved to Tokyo from out of town, and Rinji had no contact with his father's relatives growing up. His mother remarried after his father died, and he didn't keep in touch with his mother's side either. The appearance of Kenji and this group had filled the void in Rinji's heart, which was why Rinji trusted them so much. Although Rinji didn't agree to be the Kenji family's godson in his previous life, he had become even closer to Kenji. Kenji's family bought a new house, and he even lent them 1 million. Later, when the apocalypse came, Kenji's parents died in the early stages, and the money was never recovered. Calculating the time, it was almost time for Kenji to borrow money from him. "No, I'm not used to being someone else's son." Rinji smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Kenji was someone who had approached him with ulterior motives from the very beginning. In his previous life, he treated Kenji as his best friend and overlooked many things. Now that he had discarded the filter of friendship, Rinji realized Kenji's tricks weren't that clever at all. He could see right through them now. This was also related to the fact that Rinji had seen too much human malice in the apocalypse. Kenji, rejected by Rinji, was slightly taken aback. Just then, the waiter walked in with the bill. A total of over 38,000 was consumed. They rounded it to 38,000. The waiter handed the bill to everyone. Kenji, Taro, and Sakura looked at Rinji. Rinji raised an eyebrow. "Why are you looking at me?" Kenji said he was treating. Kenji acted as if he had just realized, touched his pocket in confusion, took out his phone, and said awkwardly, "Oh no, my phone is out of battery." Kenji looked to Rinji for help. If it were the Rinji of his previous life, he would have stood up and paid without a word. But now, Rinji smiled, a trace of banter in his eyes, and looked at the waiter. "Get him a charger!" The waiter's face darkened. He cast a contemptuous look at Kenji and left the room to get the charger. Walking out of the room, he said to the person at the door, "Keep an eye on them." The people outside understood immediately. The atmosphere in the room solidified. Taro and Sakura looked at each other. They were used to Rinji rushing to pay, and today's scene was something they had never even imagined. Although Kenji always said he was treating, they knew in their hearts who would pay in the end. Could it be that Rinji and Kenji were having a falling out? Taro signaled Kenji, "What's going on?" Kenji was also full of confusion, a flash of annoyance appearing on his face. Rinji was making him lose a lot of face right now. His phone had power, he had just turned it off to give Rinji a reasonable excuse to pay. Did Rinji want him to beg? Kenji held a grudge against Rinji in his heart, but he still squeezed out a smile. "Rinji, you pay for today first, I'll treat next time." Rinji naturally wouldn't leave Kenji any dignity, and said with a confused look, "Kenji, it was you who said you wanted to treat and called everyone out, right? Don't tell me you treat people without bringing money?" The smile on Kenji's face froze. Taro and Sakura looked at Rinji with incredulous eyes. They had watched for 3 years how well Rinji treated Kenji. When had they ever seen Rinji like this? There were still 4 hostesses in the room, and they hadn't even received their tips. Now they were witnessing someone trying to dine and dash. They had all heard Kenji say he was treating from the beginning, and suddenly various looks of contempt, disdain, and surprise were cast toward Kenji. At this moment, the waiter came in with the charger, placed it in front of Kenji, and made a gesture for him to go ahead. Kenji looked at the charger, stuck in a dilemma. The waiter urged coldly, "Charge it, sir. We are closing in an hour." Kenji's face looked like a palette, turning red, then white, then black. No matter how cunning he was just a 19-year-old kid who had just started hanging out. At this moment, Kenji could no longer suppress his anger. "Enough!" Kenji gritted his teeth and squeezed a few words out to Rinji. "Rinji, I beg you to pay the bill first. Can we talk about anything else later?" He still thought he had accidentally done something to make Rinji unhappy. And as long as he followed Rinji like before, Rinji would obediently do what he said. However, Rinji, who had experienced Kenji's betrayal, could never be the sucker from his previous life. Rinji's expression also turned cold. "So you really didn't bring money to treat?" Kenji felt his self-esteem being ground into the dirt, so angry his eyes turned red. "Yes." Rinji chuckled and scanned the group. "Since that's the case, let's go Dutch." "Dutch?" Taro and Sakura were not calm either. Sakura frowned. "We're out for fun. You don't expect me, a girl, to pay, right?" Taro's eyes flickered, and he said awkwardly, "I didn't know we were going Dutch." Taro pushed Kenji, whose face was as black as a pot. "Brother Kenji, how did you offend Brother Rin? Apologize to him." Kenji looked at Rinji's smirking face and wanted to kill him. He couldn't remember where he had provoked Rinji. Rinji ignored the 3 of them and paid for his own portion. 30 yen for lemon water. Kenji screamed in disbelief. "Didn't you say Dutch?" His brain couldn't process this anymore. Rinji curled his lips. Seeing Kenji like this brought him genuine pleasure. "Yes, it's Dutch. Everyone pays for what they consumed. I only had 1 glass of juice tonight. You can check the surveillance cameras if you don't believe me." The matter progressed to the point where they could only check the cameras at the club, which confirmed that what Rinji said was true. After Rinji paid the 30 yen, they let him leave. Rinji pushed the door open and walked away under the angry glares of Kenji and the other 2. Only the 3 of them remained, facing the waiter's cold reminder, "You still owe 37,970 yen. Please pay the bill." Did Rinji really just walk away like that? The 3 of them couldn't believe that the usually easygoing Rinji had become so cold-blooded. By the time the 3 of them reacted, Rinji was already far away. "Rinji, wait for me!" Sakura wanted to follow Renji, but was blocked by the waiter. "Why are you stopping me? The person in front is my boyfriend." Sakura looked at the waiter angrily, her tone unkind. The waiter sneered. "Then you can call your boyfriend and have him pay your share." Sakura was so angry her chest heaved, but she didn't dare to be fierce with this intimidating waiter. She turned and glared fiercely at Kenji. "What are you dazing for? Pay the bill quickly." I don't have that much money." Having lost all face in front of the girl he liked, Kenji already hated Renji to the bone. He hadn't been working for a year, and his savings hadn't even broken 4 digits. How could he possibly pay 38,000? Renji was right. Kenji had seen Renji spend over 100,000 in a few minutes yesterday, turned green with envy, and thought of calling Renji out today to rip him off. Kenji just knew that Renji would definitely pay, and that he couldn't leave them, his only best friends. So even if he felt the sting, he would compromise. It was clearly like this before, so why did he seem like a different person today? Kenji dialed Renji's phone, refusing to believe it. Renji, feeling refreshed after walking out of the club, hung up on Kenji, blocked all of them, and went home. Kenji made the call, it was hung up, and when he dialed again, he couldn't get through at all. Only then did he truly believe that Renji wouldn't care about them anymore. Facing the menacing gazes of the waiter and the club security guards outside, Kenji whispered, "Let's go Dutch." Taro and Sakura naturally refused. One of them had just started working and the other was still a student. The idea of coming to the club was Kenji's. And it was Kenji who said he would treat. Even the hostesses were called by Kenji. The 3 of them had a huge argument. And in the end, the club called the police, who arrived, and the 3 of them had to call their families for money to settle the bill. Because Kenji wanted to scam Renji, he drank the most and the most expensive things, so he had to pay 18,000. Taro also drank quite a bit and had to pay 13,000. Sakura paid 7,000 reluctantly. The 3 who walked out of the Shinjuku club parted on bad terms. Taro and Kenji had a big fight, blaming each other, and almost broke up. Sakura didn't give Kenji a good look either. She blocked Kenji the moment she got back. After just one party, he not only broke up with his best brothers, but the girl he loved also kicked him out of her pond. Kenji hated Renji in his heart. However, Kenji didn't get any comfort when he got home, but was scolded by his father, who angrily cursed Kenji for being ignorant, saying the family was planning to buy a house and borrow money from Renji, and yet he caused this scene, ordering him to apologize to Renji immediately. Kenji's father thought it must be because Kenji's motive to rip Renji off was too obvious, offending Renji and making him angry. Renji didn't know about any of this, and even if he did, he wouldn't care. The next day, Renji still exercised early, and not long after breakfast, he received a call from a real estate agent. This agent was a young woman named Aiko. "Mr. Rin, I have a client who wants to see the house. When are you available?" "So soon?" Renji was slightly surprised. "I'm available now. You can bring the person over." 10 minutes later, Renji heard the doorbell. Opening the door, a middle-aged man in a jacket walked in, followed by the young and beautiful Aiko. Aiko began to introduce the advantages of the house in detail. Renji stepped aside. The agents were the experts at selling houses, he just had to wait. The middle-aged man very readily offered to buy it in full. Aiko negotiated a price of 9.45 million. Renji was a bit surprised. This was faster than he had imagined by more than just a little. Later, as the two left, seeing the man's groping hand toward Aiko, Renji understood something. Not long after they left, Aiko returned. "Mr. Rin, I have fought for it with the client. Please prepare the things, Mr. Rin." To avoid any accidents with this big deal, Aiko had used all her efforts. Okay. Although creeped out by this woman's methods, Renji was quite satisfied with the result. The faster the house was sold, the sooner he could start the next step. Aiko then began to explain the documents needed for the transfer in detail. As she talked, Aiko slowly moved her body closer. Renji stepped back a few steps, his cold gaze sweeping toward Aiko. Aiko was 25 or 26, in the prime of her youth, and her figure wasn't bad. But he had no interest in such unscrupulous women. Swept by Renji's gaze, Aiko felt as if her heart had gone cold. She had never seen a young boy with such cold eyes. But thinking of the huge commission, Kiemi still forced herself to wear her most beautiful smile. "Hayashi, you said before that any amount over 9 million would count as commission. I keep my word, it will be transferred to you once the transaction is complete. I have to head out in a moment, so I won't keep you, Miss Kimi." Since she had the ability to earn 450,000 from a single deal, Hayashi naturally wouldn't go back on his word. With this money, he could start his next plan. Hearing this, Chiemi breathed a sigh of relief and took her leave. Hayashi was also preparing to go out. He had an appointment to sign the warehouse lease contract today. Hayashi had taken a look around the warehouse and was very satisfied. Before renting, he had made a few requests. There should be few people around, the warehouse should have good security, and the inside should not be visible from the outside. The agent was meticulous, found a warehouse according to Hayashi's requests, and had even checked it out in advance. The contract was signed smoothly. Tomorrow, after his apartment delivery was finalized, Hayashi could move into the warehouse. When leaving, Hayashi stopped the agent. This agent was a man in his late 20s named Ryo. Hayashi felt that this man was careful and steady. With less than 3 months until the apocalypse, he needed to collect massive amounts of supplies and upgrade his treasure basin. It wasn't something he could finish in a few days. Building a shelter was time-consuming and labor-intensive, and he needed someone to help. Ryo, are you interested in working for me? I can offer you an annual salary of 500,000. Hayashi dangled the carrot. Ryo was stunned. An annual salary of 500,000? That was 200,000 or 300,000 more than his salary as a real estate agent. But he was skeptical and suspicious, wondering if Hayashi was joking with him. He asked cautiously, "What do you need me to do?" He couldn't do anything illegal. Hayashi gathered his thoughts and said, "It's like this. I'm a doomsday survival enthusiast. I want to build an independent safe house in Kyoto, but I'm stuck in Tokyo." Doomsday survival enthusiast? Safe house? Even as steady as Ryo was, his face twitched upon hearing Hayashi's words. As a real estate agent, he had rented and sold all kinds of properties. Naturally, he knew that some wealthy people had peculiar ideas. Because there were rumors online about a possible World War III or natural disasters, some rich, fearful bosses would build an extreme environment survival system in the basement under their villas. But those were all big bosses over 40. This was the first time he had been asked to help build a safe house alone. If the young man in front of him hadn't just completed a deal through him, Ryo might have thought he was a scammer and walked away. Hayashi also knew that words were not enough, so he gestured for Ryo to take out his mobile payment code and transferred 100,000 to him. This was more than 2 months' salary. Now Ryo believed Hayashi's words. Who would joke with so much money? However, being cautious, he asked to sign a contract with Hayashi. Hayashi had the same intention. The shelter was closely related to his future survival, and he couldn't rely on just a few words to make Ryo work for him wholeheartedly. After discussing the details of the contract, the two signed it. The content of the contract was roughly that Hayashi hired Ryo as his private butler for an annual salary of 500,000. He would be responsible for handling the construction of the new house in Kyoto, supervision and acceptance, and helping Hayashi with some miscellaneous chores. Hayashi would guarantee Ryo Suskov's salary and other legitimate rights and interests. Hayashi's deadline was tight, and Ryo resigned and took the job immediately and efficiently. With this job, he could buy a house in the suburbs of Tokyo after just a few years of work, which was far better than being a real estate agent. He secretly made up his mind to work hard and let boss Hayashi see his ability. He did not know that this job would end in 3 months. Hayashi had no intention of employing him for long. Once the shelter was completed, Ryo's work would be over. Hayashi ordered directly, "Ryo, you go to Kyoto first and find a piece of land for sale according to my requirements." Hayashi's requirements were high terrain, flat, no high-rise buildings around, remote location, large land area, and ready for immediate construction. This was Ryo's old line of work. It shouldn't be difficult for him. Understood, boss. Ryo quickly took on the role and immediately booked the earliest flight. Kyoto is a famous tourist destination, and also the city closest to the equator, where there is no winter all year round. After the extreme cold apocalypse arrived, human living space shrank drastically. The northern temperatures were extremely low and no longer suitable for human habitation. Even though northern buildings were more cold-resistant than southern ones, the natural gas pipelines in the north were soon frozen and cracked, losing heating, and with outdoor temperatures reaching an average of -70 degrees, the food source was almost cut off, forcing northerners to migrate to the south. And this was just the situation in summer. Only a few areas with state grain depots could barely survive and establish survivor shelters. Although the equator did not escape the extreme cold, it was at least 30 or 40 degrees warmer than the north, with an average temperature of only -30 to -50. Moreover, Kyoto was near the sea, and the authorities would occasionally cut through the ice to salvage frozen sea fish, so food was not as scarce as in the north. Hayashi had prepared in advance in this life, not because he was greedy for official supplies. After having a space to carry massive amounts of supplies, safety became the most important consideration for Hayashi. The most terrifying thing in the apocalypse was not the extremely harsh weather, but humanity itself. In the extreme cold without food, people driven to hunger would stop at nothing, and incidents of killing for supplies were common. No city had stable order. Kyoto had the largest official shelter in the empire, and most of the empire's senior officials, scientific researchers, and the military were gathered there. Naturally, the order was much better than in other places. Moreover, he had heard in his previous life that Kyoto had developed food that could be grown in extreme cold. If he were to do this in this life, he would do it best and build his shelter directly in Kyoto. After Hayashi gave Ryo further instructions on the precautions for building the shelter, early the next day, after finishing his daily morning exercise, Hayashi put everything he could take from the house into the space. He threw away useless things downstairs. Before leaving, Hayashi took one last look at the empty house and turned away without nostalgia. It was just a house. For him, anywhere was home. Hayashi didn't know that shortly after he left home, Akira went to his house to look for him. But because she couldn't find Hayashi, she was scolded by Akira's parents for the next few days. Hayashi went to handle the house transfer procedures at the agreed time. After the money arrived, he transferred $450,000 to Kiemi. Then he went straight to the bank. The central bank, the largest headquarters in Tokyo, was located in the city center. Because he needed a large amount of gold and was afraid that the bank wouldn't have that much on hand, Hayashi had called the account manager to make an appointment yesterday when he confirmed that the house could be transferred today. It was already afternoon when he arrived at the bank. On the way, he bought a suitcase to carry the gold. Now Hayashi's savings had reached 25.4 million, including his original savings and the 3 gold bars he sold. After deducting the warehouse rent and the money spent on Ryo and miscellaneous items, 15.4 million remained. The house sale brought in 9 million. He borrowed 1 million through various online loan apps. If it weren't for the regulation that one person could not borrow more than 1 million from different formal platforms, Hayashi would have borrowed more. Now Hayashi's funds totaled 25.4 million, which could buy 60 kilograms of gold. According to the rule that the money points increase exponentially each time the treasure basin levels up, 60 kilograms of gold could upgrade the space 4 times and then upgrade item replication twice. Upgrading the space 5 times or item replication 3 times alone would not be enough. The current volume of the space was 216 cubic meters, which would be almost enough after 4 upgrades. Hayashi wanted to know what would happen after the item replication ability was upgraded. There were many people in the bank, and Hayashi was very conspicuous carrying a suitcase, so a bank staff member immediately came up to ask, "How may I help you?" Hayashi said, "I'm here to buy gold. I made an appointment yesterday." "Which manager did you contact?" "Surname, Kuroda." Soon Hayashi was taken to an office door. Chu Katori was an account manager at the headquarters of the central bank in Tokyo. A client with 10 million in savings had called her, saying he wanted to buy 60 kilograms of gold at the bank. Chu Katori was very surprised. What was the concept of 60 kilograms of gold? Although the international gold price had dropped by a few yuan in the past 2 days, gold was still 413 yuan per gram, plus the bank's minimum processing fee of 5 yuan, so 60 kilograms of gold required 25.08 million. Generally, wealthy people invested by buying gold stocks or gold futures. Very few people bought such a large amount of physical gold. Moreover, the situation had been unstable in recent years, and the price of gold had remained high, making it very easy to lose money by buying so much physical gold. Chu Katori curiously checked the customer's profile. The profile showed that this person was named Hayashi and was only 19 years old. Chu Katori had a deep impression of this boy. 3 years ago, at Takahashi New Energy Company, Limited, the largest new energy company in Tokyo, an electrical engineer died, unfortunately, due to an accident at work. Takahashi New Energy Company, Limited, compensated him with 10 million, which was highly praised at the time. Not long after, the son of that electrical engineer received the bribe money, and it was Chu Katori who handled the business for him. Chu Katori remembered that the boy was named Hayashi. Chu Katori checked the bank's inventory of physical gold, and after confirming it was in stock, she replied to Hayashi that he could come to complete the purchase procedure at any time. She waited all morning, her eyes occasionally looking toward the door. She waited for half a day but didn't see anyone come. At noon, when she was about to take a break, there was a knock on the door. "Manager, the customer buying gold is here." Hayashi had waited in the lobby for a while when a woman with lasting charm, dressed in a uniform, walked out. He glanced at the badge on her chest. Account manager. Are you Mr. Hayashi? Chukatori smiled appropriately and said politely, Please follow me. Hayashi nodded and followed Chukatori to the VIP room. Chukatori first explained the purchase process of physical gold bars to Hayashi. Buying physical gold meant that if the gold price didn't rise by more than a dozen yuan, it was equivalent to a loss, because processing fees, service fees, etc. had to be added when buying. But Hayashi was not buying gold for investment, so a loss of a dozen yuan was not a big problem for him. I've already understood. Let's process the paperwork now. Choosing specifications, opening an account, filling out forms. Apart from the fact that this account manager's gaze made Hayashi feel a bit uncomfortable, the rest of the steps went smoothly. Hayashi's 25.4 million in savings could purchase 61,000 grams gold bars at today's real-time international gold price of 412 yuan per gram, after deducting processing and service fees. 1,000 grams was chosen by Hayashi himself. Anyway, he was going to sell them back, so there was no need to choose any specific style. 1,000 grams bars were also easier to upgrade. 2 of them were enough to upgrade to the next level of space. After buying gold bars, one could choose to deposit them in the bank or take them home. Hayashi naturally requested to take them home. Chukatori counted out 60 gold bars from the safe. She lined them up one by one on the counter. Her eyes, looking at Hayashi, became increasingly warm. Being able to invest in so much gold, Hayashi was definitely her big client. Thinking that she could get a commission equal to 2 months' salary after completing this order, Chukatori thought the little brother in front of her looked more and more pleasing to the eye. Hayashi looked away. By the time he brought back the replicated gold bars tomorrow, this woman would probably want to swallow him whole. The VIP room and the lobby were separated by a huge frosted glass with slight striped gaps through which the situation in the lobby could be seen. Hayashi boredly scanned the bank lobby, and his gaze suddenly froze. He saw that someone in the crowd was acting strange. Hayashi observed carefully and found that it wasn't just one person, but 4. These 4 people were dressed ordinarily, seemingly sitting loosely in different seats in the bank, waiting in line. Even the bank security guards couldn't see anything unusual, but Hayashi had survived from the piles of dead bodies in the apocalypse. He had seen many vicious criminals in the 8 years of the apocalypse and had killed countless people. He could see at a glance that these 4 people had killing intent. It was still a peaceful era. How could ordinary people have killing intent? If he didn't come, fine, but the one time he came, he ran into a bank robbery? Hayashi recalled whether there was any news about a bank robbery in Tokyo before the apocalypse in his previous life, but he couldn't think of anything after thinking for a while. Did some butterfly effect occur after he returned? Seemingly sensing Hayashi's gaze, one of them turned his head, and Hayashi quickly looked away. Tokyo was one of the safest cities in the empire. As the largest bank in Tokyo, someone actually dared to rob the bank here. Wasn't this seeking death? It was well known that robbing a bank was definitely a case where the returns did not justify the risks. Maybe he was just overthinking. With the obstruction, others couldn't see his situation there. But Hayashi still felt uneasy. Better safe than sorry. This was his entire life's fortune. If it were really robbed, he wouldn't even have a place to cry. He turned his head and whispered to Chukatori, who was still counting the gold. Wait, I won't buy it today. He didn't know when these 4 people had entered. He had been very conspicuous carrying a suitcase, and he was in the VIP room. If this group had other intentions, he might have already been targeted. What? Chukatori thought she had misheard. I said, I won't buy it today. I'll come back another day. Hayashi lowered his voice. However, Chukatori, hearing that Hayashi wouldn't buy it, suddenly felt that Hayashi was playing with her, tossing her around for half a day. The gold bars were even taken out, and now he was telling her he wouldn't buy it? Was her commission gone? Chukatori was very angry, and her voice became louder. Sir, your transaction has already been successful. The transaction amount has already been deducted. If you want to return it, Hayashi interrupted Chukatori's subsequent words. He now hoped that the account manager would put the gold bars away quickly. Chukatori's face turned blue with anger, but she had to force a smile. She didn't put the gold bars away, but wanted to continue reasoning with Hayashi. Mr. Hayashi, these gold bars are already yours. If you want to return them, it is equivalent to letting the gold bars go through a repurchase process, and you will lose processing and service fees. Hayashi cast a peripheral glance, seeing that one of the 4 people was already approaching the VIP room. The man was about 30 years old, dressed in a black, casual outfit with a buzz cut and an ordinary appearance. But looking closely at his eyes, one could see the hidden viciousness. He was a person who had killed and seen blood. And although he was Asian, his appearance gave Hayashi a feeling that he was not from this country. Seeing this, Hayashi felt even more that his guess might be true. Chukatori was still nagging and reasoning with Hayashi. Hayashi secretly cursed, "This brainless woman!" Hayashi lowered his voice and said, "Quickly put the gold bars away. Otherwise, if it gets robbed, you will be responsible for the consequences." Chukatori, seeing Hayashi so stubborn, was so angry that her chest heaved. "Mr. Hayashi, these gold bars are still on the counter on my side. Even if it gets robbed, it is the responsibility of my bank. Please do not change the subject." Hayashi's focus shifted. "You mean even if it gets robbed now, it's not mine?" At this time, the security guard also noticed something and walked over. VIP rooms usually handle large transactions, and seeing a person suddenly approaching there, the security guard was subconsciously vigilant. The security guard walked up to the man with a buzz cut and blocked his way. "Hello, please wait in line in the lobby for ordinary transactions." Sorry, I didn't know." The buzz-cut man showed an apologetic expression, as if he was going to bow and apologize. However, Hayashi's pupils suddenly shrank. A black handgun was quickly pulled out from the buzz-cut man's pocket, pressed against the security guard's abdomen. A soft squelch was heard, and the guard fell to the ground in disbelief, blood pouring endlessly from his stomach, staining his once clean and tidy uniform red. The next second, the other 3 robbers drew their handguns! They each fired a shot at the security guard who had pulled out a stun baton. Gunshots and screams echoed throughout the lobby, followed by a piercing alarm. A bank clerk sitting at the counter had pressed the alarm button immediately. Meanwhile, the man with the buzz cut had already shot open the door to the VIP room. Hayashi's eyes met those of the buzz cut man. Seeing the greed and murderous intent in the buzz cut man's eyes, Hayashi immediately squatted on the ground, covering his head with his hands, and shuffled into a corner. If anyone asked him what to do when encountering danger, Hayashi would tell you very firmly, "If you can win, fight. If you can't win, run. If you can't run, surrender." They had 4 guns, and he was empty-handed. Be a hero? Stop joking, isn't it better to stay alive? Hayashi crouched silently in the corner. The others in the lobby had already been controlled by the robbers. These 4 robbers were clearly prepared and had a clear division of labor. One was responsible for monitoring the outside, one for guarding the hostages, and another was walking toward the buzz-cut man with a handbag. Chukatori, inside the counter, was terrified. Could anyone really dare to rob the headquarters of the Empire Bank? The buzz-cut man walked straight to the counter, aimed his gun at Chukatori behind the bulletproof glass, and threatened, "Take out the gold bars! Hurry!" Chukatori did not obey. Instead, she started packing the gold bars to lock them back in the safe. Although she was terrified, they had received training. The headquarters, bulletproof glass, could not be penetrated by ordinary handguns. This was the city center, and the bank's alarm was connected to the nearest police station. In less than 10 minutes, officers would arrive. However, there were other bank staff members outside the counter. One robber held a gun to a staff member's head and brought him to the door of the VIP room. The staff member was so scared he wet himself. "Get the gold bars out as fast as you can. If you're 10 seconds late, I'll kill someone." Chukatori had no choice but to comply. Hayashi watched this scene quietly from the corner. He noticed that none of the robbers went to the other counters to steal cash. The goal of these 4 people was very clear. They only wanted the gold in the VIP room. A robber with even a little bit of intelligence wouldn't run into a bank to steal cash. Every banknote in a bank has a recorded serial number, making it impossible to spend. Gold, however, can be melted down and circulated on the market. But there was a suspicious point here. The gold inventory at the counter was limited. Most of the bank's large gold bars were kept in the vault. If they didn't manage to get a huge amount of gold, the risk and reward of robbing the bank wouldn't be proportional. How did these robbers know there would be a huge amount of gold at the counter today? There were definitely not many people like him who bought 25 million worth of physical gold. Hayashi looked at Chukatori, who was trembling as she handed over the gold bars. A sudden flash of insight crossed his mind. Perhaps someone had leaked the information that he would be coming to the bank to buy a huge amount of gold today. Thinking about it this way, everything became clear. They had been waiting for this batch of gold bars to appear. Hayashi felt a chill in his heart, and at the same time, his eyes turned terrifyingly cold. Fortunately, he hadn't taken the gold bars away yet, and the security guard had discovered the anomaly. Otherwise, once he had loaded the gold bars into his suitcase, he definitely wouldn't have survived without being prepared. The 60 gold bars were quickly handed out through the window by Chukatori and collected into the handbag by the robbers. The gold bars didn't look very large in volume, but the weight of 60 kilograms was real. One robber was struggling to carry it. At this moment, the buzz-cut man noticed the suitcase by the counter. Hayashi cursed inwardly. Sure enough, the buzz-cut man noticed Hayashi. Because he intended to carry the gold, the suitcase Hayashi had bought was black, small, and had a combination lock. The buzz-cut man glared ferociously and said to Hayashi, "Come here! Open this suitcase!" Hayashi put on a terrified expression, walked over, and obediently opened the suitcase. The robber put the handbag containing the gold bars into the suitcase. Hayashi kept his eyes fixed on the robber's actions throughout the process. 25 million worth of gold, all in one small suitcase. If he used his space to put these gold bars away now, Hayashi immediately dismissed the idea. The bank's surveillance equipment was still working normally. A suitcase suddenly disappearing right in front of a group of people would be too conspicuous. 25 million worth of gold disappearing into thin air would be investigated to the end. If he exposed the treasure basin, it wouldn't be worth the loss. The sound of police sirens could be heard faintly in the distance. The robbers' movements were fast, but the police were faster. Hearing the sirens, the robbers were clearly panicked. They prepared to leave immediately. Before leaving, the buzz-cut man glanced at Hayashi again. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed him! Hayashi instinctively wanted to dodge and counterattack. But suddenly remembering something, he forcibly suppressed his instinct and didn't move. The buzz-cut man grabbed Hayashi and held his gun against his back. Muttering, "Move!" Hayashi obediently followed the robbers out of the bank. There was a getaway car outside. Hayashi was pushed into the vehicle. It turned out there were 5 robbers in total. This was an SUV. 4 big men in the back row were very crowded, but none of them complained. They all silently accepted the buzz-cut man bringing Hayashi into the car. Just as Hayashi was being held hostage in the car, a reporter who happened to be working nearby arrived and filmed a video of Hayashi being taken hostage. The Empire Bank headquarters in Tokyo has been robbed, and a young man has unfortunately been taken hostage. Through short video platforms, this news was immediately pushed to the trending list. Countless netizens saw the scene of Hayashi being taken into the car. Holy crap, in my lifetime I actually get to see some idiots rob a bank? Damn, someone actually dares to rob the headquarters. They've got some guts. I bet these robbers won't escape for even a day. These robbers actually have guns. I bet they'll be caught in half a day. I believe in the skill of our country's police. The guy being held hostage is probably in grave danger, right? That person being held hostage looks like my high school classmate. Isn't that my college classmate, Hayashi? Damn, my high school classmate is also named Hayashi. Soon, people discovered that the Hayashi they knew was the same person. Thus, another short video was born. Top university student taken hostage by bank robbers, life or death unknown. The short video was produced and reached the trending page. The video even included a clear front-facing photo of Hayashi. Looking at the young, handsome, and slightly immature face in the photo, countless aunties and sisters were worried and praying for him, tagging the officials to ensure the successful rescue of the hostage. The college classmate who posted the video gained countless followers. Hayashi had no idea he had already become viral. Not long after the vehicle started, the sound of police sirens behind them drew closer and closer. The 5 people in the car were breathing visibly heavily. One of them said something in a gibberish language. Hayashi realized that these 5 people were probably not from the Empire. At this point, the gold suitcase was being stepped on by one of the robbers. Hayashi could touch it just by stretching his foot. As long as his hand could touch the suitcase, he could transfer the contents into his space. That's right, Hayashi was aiming for this box of gold. When the gold was stolen, it was still inside the counter, and he hadn't touched it, so the loss would naturally be on the bank. He would still receive 60 kilograms of gold bars as compensation from the bank. If he collected this stolen gold into his space, regardless of whether these robbers escaped, the blame for the missing gold would be theirs. He would possess 120 kilograms of gold. After duplicating it, that would be a full 240 kilograms. Using 120 kilograms of gold to upgrade the treasure basin was twice his original plan. Fortune favors the bold. As long as these 5 robbers were safe, he was safe. At this time, Hayashi was sitting with the 3 robbers in the back, very close to the suitcase, but bending over to touch the suitcase would be too deliberate. He was waiting for an opportunity. The robber driving the SUV was very skilled, weaving through traffic at around 80 kilometers per hour. He narrowly avoided other vehicles many times, leaving the police cars far behind. But soon, the robbers noticed 2 helicopters following them from above. Hayashi heard the buzz-cut man curse using international profanity. Not long after, A roadblock appeared on the road ahead. Those rows of sharp spikes could not be broken through, even by an SUV. A group of SWAT officers was waiting behind the roadblock. The screech of emergency brakes sounded, and everyone in the SUV leaned forward. Hayashi's eyes flashed. Just as everyone was off balance and their attention was focused on the roadblock and the SWAT team in front of the vehicle, Hayashi leaned over, quickly touched the suitcase with his hand, and immediately sat back up. None of the robbers noticed anything abnormal. These robbers didn't know that the gold they had fought so hard to steal had already disappeared, all collected into the space by Hayashi. Now he had to find a way to escape. The SUV reversed wildly, turned around and escaped into a small road, followed by the helicopters. On one of the helicopters, a camera was pointed at the robbers' SUV. The SUV seemed to take a detour, and 10 minutes later, an overpass appeared ahead. Traffic was moving back and forth under the overpass, but Hayashi's body tensed up. A common black sedan was parked under the overpass. But Hayashi saw something wrong at a glance. Even if someone had an emergency, they would park on the roadside outside the overpass, not under the bridge. And the area under the overpass happened to be a blind spot for helicopter surveillance. This was likely a vehicle prepared in advance by the robbers to shake off pursuit. If these robbers got out of the car, they would discover the gold bars in the suitcase were gone, and he would be in a passive position. It turned out Hayashi was right. The SUV braked sharply as soon as it entered under the overpass. If they weren't changing cars, there was no need to brake sharply when there were no cars in front. Just as the SUV braked sharply, Hayashi, sitting between the two robbers, suddenly reached out and touched the hands of the two robbers holding the guns. The two robbers were about to react, but their hands felt empty. The handguns were gone. They were stunned for a moment. In an instant, the robber's guns appeared in Hayashi's hands, and he shot the third armed robber in the back row in the head. Then he fired 2 more shots, killing the 2 unarmed robbers in the back row with headshots. At such close range, Hayashi didn't need to aim. Hearing the gunshots from the back row, the buzz-cut man in the front turned his head subconsciously, his body leaning forward due to inertia. Before he could make a move, Hayashi's muzzle was already pointed at his head. The buzz-cut man's pupils dilated. He hadn't expected that the rich, second-generation hostage he thought was weak could grab the guns from his companions. The skilled movements, the fast and ruthless shooting, and the coldness that didn't match his young appearance. The buzz-cut man opened his mouth as if to say something, but Hayashi had already pulled the trigger. All this took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in a flash. The robber in the driver's seat had kept his hands on the steering wheel the whole time. Realizing something was wrong, he immediately pulled out the gun from his waist. But before he could disengage the safety, his head exploded. Thus, all 5 robbers were taken down. This SUV actually used bulletproof glass. It was quite soundproof, and since no vehicles were passing by, it didn't alert anyone. After Hayashi shot the robber in the driver's seat, he got out of the car as fast as he could, avoiding the sight of passing cars, placed his hand on the car body, and collected the car along with the corpses into the space. Then, he flew toward the black sedan. He pulled open the door and sat in. The car was indeed unlocked, and the keys were still in it. Hayashi stepped on the gas and drove away. 10 minutes later, confirming that no helicopters had locked onto his position, Hayashi drove the car to a secluded mountain forest. Because the change of cars was so fast, the helicopters didn't react to the fact that the criminals had changed vehicles, and because there were originally cars passing under that bridge, Hayashi soon escaped official surveillance while driving. Confirming again that there was no one around and no surveillance, Hayashi put the black sedan into his space and took out the SUV. He began to collect his spoils. 5 handguns from the 5 robbers, with a total of 10 magazines. Hayashi picked up a gun and skillfully replaced the empty magazine. He had handled guns in his previous life, but gun control in the Empire was strict, making it very difficult to get hold of a handgun. Guns are extremely precious supplies both before and after the apocalypse. Besides the gold bars, handguns were also his goal in taking such a big risk. With handguns, his survival ability in the early stages of the apocalypse would undoubtedly be greatly improved. Hayashi searched the car interior for a while. He found a small amount of cash and 2 daggers. He collected all these items and the gold bars. Although there were surprises during this gold purchase, the harvest far exceeded his expectations. After confirming nothing was left behind, Hayashi put the SUV back into his space. After the apocalypse, he would just throw these people into the sea, letting them be sealed under thick ice, never to be found by anyone. After handling everything, Hayashi walked a distance and hailed a taxi. On the other side, the police arrived at the overpass where the SUV was lost and found it empty. They found it empty. The robbers in the SUV seemed to have disappeared into thin air, and the cameras under the overpass had been sabotaged by the robbers in advance. All police officers returned empty-handed. Half an hour later, at the city center police station. You mean after those people drove the car into the mountains? They let you go? Then they drove off? Do you remember the license plate number? Did you see which direction they went? The police officer asked one question after another. The Empire Bank headquarters had been robbed of $25 million worth of gold bars, and a hostage had been taken. This incident had attracted widespread attention in Tokyo and across the entire nation. Although the hostage was safe and sound, the robbers and the gold bars were missing, which gave the leaders of the city center police station a massive headache. Faced with the officers' questions, Hayashi answered truthfully whatever he could. Whatever he couldn't answer, he acted innocent, saying he didn't know, wasn't sure, and didn't pay attention. The robbers and the car had evaporated, and the more lies he made up, the more holes there would be. Hayashi only needed to play dumb. Though he was also a suspect, as long as the police investigated, knew that he had never had any contact with robbers before today. You have to realize, just a few days ago, he was still a proper university student. He didn't need such a flawless lie. The official investigation would be able to clear Hayashi of suspicion. Officer, can the gold bars still be recovered? If they can't be recovered, the bank will compensate me, right? After the questioning ended, Hayashi expressed concern about his gold bars. Just as the police officer was about to speak, Chukatori and a middle-aged man in a suit hurriedly walked into the police station. As soon as the middle-aged man entered, he asked, "Has the hostage been found? Where is he? What about the gold bars?" The officer said to Hayashi, "The bank people are here. The older one is the deputy branch manager. You can communicate directly with him." Soon, the deputy branch manager of the Empire Bank, Kuroda, sat down across from Hayashi. The police officer had already left, leaving only Hayashi, Chukotori, and Kuroda in the room. "You are the hostage? You're back? And the gold bars are gone?" Kuroda's tone carried a sense of interrogation, which made Hayashi slightly displeased, though he didn't show it on his face. "You can ask the police those questions? I want to ask, when will you give me my gold bars?" Kuroda frowned and glanced at Chukotori. Chukotori took out a document and handed it to Hayashi, saying, "Mr. Hayashi, your gold bars were stolen by the robbers. If the gold is not recovered, our bank is willing to compensate you for 50% of the loss. If you have no issues, please sign this document." Currently, the news of the gold being stolen had gone viral online, and if they didn't want this matter to cause reputational damage to the bank, they had to resolve it as quickly as possible. 50%? Hayashi turned his head and looked at Chukatori with a half-smile. "Didn't you say that if they were stolen, it would be the bank's responsibility?" Chukatori's eyes darted away, but remembering the instructions from the deputy manager before they left, she still maintained a righteous expression and said, "The loss of the gold bars was caused by a third party. Our bank security personnel saw 4 people die and 2 seriously injured in this incident. We have fulfilled our obligations. We are also very sorry that such a thing happened. If the gold bars can be found, we will definitely hand them over to you in full." Hayashi scanned the document Chukatori handed over. It was filled with dense professional jargon. The gist was that if the gold bars could not be recovered, the bank would compensate Hayashi with half the gold, and Hayashi could no longer pursue the bank's responsibility. Hayashi almost laughed. They were acting as if they were doing him a favor, all while treating him like a 3-year-old child? Hayashi glanced at the deputy manager. The man looked composed, as if compensating half was already an act of mercy. "I remember the gold bars were taken by the robbers while still inside the counter. The gold bars were never given to me, so the transaction between the bank and me was never completed. Your bank losing the gold bars has absolutely nothing to do with me." Kuroda was somewhat surprised that a 19-year-old could remain this calm after being held hostage by criminals. He said earnestly, "Hayashi, the loss of the gold bars is not entirely the bank's responsibility. How about this? We compensate you 60%. In addition, I have a good personal relationship with a professor at your university. I can apply for a postgraduate recommendation spot for you. How about that?" Not interested, Hayashi refused flatly. Seeing Hayashi was impervious to persuasion, Kuroda's face looked unpleasant, and he said in an unfriendly tone, "Young man, don't be too greedy. I heard you don't have a single adult at home, just you alone. You're still young and haven't entered society, You don't know that young people nowadays have to learn how to compromise. Otherwise, offending people you shouldn't offend will affect your future. Haha, are you threatening me? A cold glint flashed in Hayashi's eyes. Chukotori tried to smooth things over. Mr. Hayashi, we are communicating with you about compensation in good faith. However, we would like to know, how did you know those people were going to rob the bank? These robbers committed all kinds of crimes, yet they spared you. Mr. Hayashi, do you really not know these robbers? Are you trying to say that I am an accomplice of the robbers? Hayashi was so angry he laughed. Neither spoke, which was clearly an admission. Since they couldn't reach an agreement, Hayashi didn't want to waste time. He stood up and walked straight out. Then the two of you should assist the police in finding evidence. I will recover my property through legal channels. If he sued the bank, his chances of winning were very high, but it would take a long time. However, since the gold was already in his hands, he wasn't losing anything. As for the threat from this deputy manager, he hoped the man would still be able to stand and talk to him in 3 months. A flash of murderous intent flickered in Hayashi's eyes. At that moment, his phone suddenly rang. The caller ID was an unknown number. Thinking it was an advertisement, Hayashi put it on speaker. Once connected, a female voice came through. Hello, is this Mr. Hayashi? I am a reporter from the city's XX News. I would like to conduct a special interview with you. Do you have some time? Hayashi was stunned. A local reporter? Why would a reporter want to interview him? Just as he was about to refuse, another call came in. It was also an unknown number. Sorry, let me take this call first. After finishing, Hayashi hung up and answered the second call. Mr. Hayashi, hello. We are XX New Media. We would like to... Before they could finish, another phone number called in. Hayashi hung up that one suspiciously and continued to answer. Is this student Hayashi? I am a reporter from the Central Empire News. Even a reporter from the Central Empire News was calling him? Hayashi raised an eyebrow and didn't hang up, but instead started chatting with the CCTV reporter. I am Hayashi, what can I do for you? Student Hayashi, do you have time for an interview? The vast number of netizens are very curious about how you escaped from the hands of the robbers. Hayashi hesitated. He didn't want to be famous. 21st century netizens were terrifying. If his little tricks were dug up, he would be done for. Although killing the robbers was technically self-defense, swallowing the gold was a fact. A glance to the side revealed that Chukotori and the deputy manager were staring at him intently, looking somewhat nervous. His refusal turned into an agreement. All right. After agreeing on the time and place, Hayashi hung up the phone and continued walking out. Kuroda's eyes flashed with annoyance. He had intended to take action before the reporters arrived. Who knew that Hayashi would be so stubborn? Wait, let's talk more. Chukotori tried to grab Hayashi's arm, but he dodged away. Hayashi turned and looked at Chukotori, raising an eyebrow as if remembering something. I provided the police with a clue regarding the robbers, motive for the heist. What clue? Chukotori asked instinctively. When I was being held hostage, I heard the robbers say that some bank staff member leaked information about my gold purchase, which is why they targeted this batch of gold and robbed the bank. This sentence was actually fabricated by Hayashi as he couldn't understand the robbers' conversation at all. But that didn't stop him from trying to trick this woman. If anyone had leaked his information, the woman in front of him was the most likely suspect. Chukotori's heart sank, and as if realizing something, a flash of panic crossed her face. Seeing Chukotori's increasingly panicked expression, Hayashi, who only had 50% certainty before, now had 100%. Tisk tisk tisko. 4 security guards were killed and the bank lost over 20 million. I wonder how many years the leaker will be sentenced to. Watching Chukotori look so dejected, Hayashi smiled maliciously. No wonder the bank robbery that didn't appear in his previous life happened in this one. It really was the butterfly effect caused by his rebirth and trip to the bank to buy gold. Kuroda's eyes widened in anger, shouting at Hayashi's retreating back. Seeing Hayashi leave without stopping, Kuroda grabbed Chukotori's arm tightly. What is going on? He had only come to negotiate with Hayashi on the premise that it wasn't the bank's full responsibility. He never expected that the robbers were even lured in by one of their own. Then what the hell was there to negotiate? It wasn't me! Chukotori screamed. Seeing Chukotori's guilty demeanor, how could Kuroda not understand that the leaker Hayashi mentioned was Chukotori? Now that Hayashi was in contact with television station personnel, he had to end this matter before it was exposed. Kuroda didn't even look at Chukotori again and walked away, leaving Chukotori sitting on the ground, muttering constantly, "It wasn't me, it wasn't me." Yesterday, after receiving the call that Hayashi was going to buy a batch of 25 million in gold, Chukotori was very happy. While eating dinner with her boyfriend at a restaurant that night, out of pride, Chukatori mentioned that a client was buying $25 million in gold. When clients made large deposits in the past, she would also brag to her boyfriend, but she never mentioned the client's name. This wasn't leaking client information at all. How could the robbers have targeted it? However, sometimes things are just that coincidental. At the restaurant where Chukatori was eating at the time, sitting in the booth behind her were two of the robbers. If you walk the night path enough, you'll eventually meet a ghost. Hayashi left the police station at dusk. He found his car and drove to the warehouse he had rented. Soon after, Hayashi received several more calls. This time, they were from advertising partners. After opening his phone and checking, Hayashi realized he had become famous. His phone was full of messages from college and high school classmates he didn't usually talk to, and even elementary school classmates. Hayashi cleared all the messages. He didn't want to be famous if he didn't know the apocalypse was coming in 3 months. Perhaps he could have utilized this heat, make some short videos, and join advertisements to make a fortune. But with the apocalypse coming soon, he didn't have the energy for such things. Netizens today are too terrifying. If any clues were found, he would be done for. He tidied up the partitions in the warehouse, ate some bread from his space, and Hayashi fell fast asleep. After a day of outsmarting people, he fell asleep as soon as he lay down. Waking up in the morning, Hayashi felt refreshed. After his morning workout and breakfast, Hayashi received a call from the bank. "Mr. Hayashi, hello. Your gold transaction at our branch yesterday has not been completed yet. When would you have time to come and collect the gold?" Hayashi raised an eyebrow. So fast? Originally, he had wanted to use the Chukatori incident and his current online fame to generate public opinion, forcing the bank to complete the interrupted transaction as soon as possible. He didn't expect the bank to react even faster. Hayashi replied, 30 minutes. After breakfast, Hayashi arrived at the bank. He thought he would have to argue with the bank for a while, but everything that followed was extremely smooth. The manager received him personally, apologized sincerely, and handed the gold bars to him personally. They even included several gifts, claiming they were compensation for mental distress. Hayashi responded in kind, agreeing to the manager's request to take a photo, and took a picture with the gold bars and the bank staff. When Hayashi left, bank staff and security personnel took the initiative to help him move his belongings and escorted him to his car. They kept smiling and waving until his car disappeared. This scene was naturally captured by reporters who had been paying attention to the bank's movements. The photos soon appeared on news websites. Netizens praised the bank's service attitude. But this no longer had anything to do with Hayashi. Originally, he was prepared to accept interviews and expose the deputy manager's recording and Chukatori's business. Now, he had achieved his goal in the shortest possible time. These time-wasting trivial matters could be spared. Whether he could survive after 3 months was unknown. Why waste time on these dead men walking? Hayashi's focus was now entirely on the gold bars. On the bed in the 10-square-meter compartment, 2 neat piles of dazzling gold bars were stacked. One pile was what he had just retrieved from the bank today. The other pile was what he had snatched from the robbers yesterday. There were also 3 smaller ones left over from before. 50 million in gold. Thinking that these gold bars could potentially double to 100 million, Hayashi's heart beat a little faster. Hayashi naturally couldn't hold 120 kilograms of gold in his hands like the first time. He placed both hands on the gold bars. Item, replication. As the words fell, dazzling golden light lit up in the small room. In the void in front of Hayashi, gold bars appeared out of thin air one by one, and the sound of heavy objects falling onto the bed kept ringing. The entire iron frame bed creaked, clearly unable to bear the weight. But Hayashi didn't care whether he would have to sleep on the floor tonight. He counted them. He replicated 123 gold bars, 120 of 1,000 grams, 3 of 500 grams. Hayashi breathed a light sigh of relief, and then a look of ecstasy spread across his face. 25 million turned into 100 million in 2 days. Anyone would be crazy with joy. At first, he wasn't sure he would succeed. What if the treasure basin had a replication limit? What if it could only replicate the gold bars his body touched? Or if there were other limiting factors? His replication might have failed, but fortunately he had worried for nothing. This item replication was even more powerful than he thought. At this point, the treasure basin interface had also changed. Treasure basin function, storage space 666, upgrade points needed 2,000. Function, item replication 1, upgrade points needed 10,000. Item replication only had 1 chance left. He wondered if this number would change after upgrading. Hayashi first organized the gold bars. Every gold bar from the bank had a serial number. He first organized the replicas of the 60 gold bars retrieved today, which were to be sold back to the bank. Then he placed the other 63 replicas on the other side. These could be melted down to find channels for sale. Hayashi picked up two 1,000 grams original gold bars and muttered in his heart, "Upgrade space!" Suppressing his excitement, Hayashi first upgraded the space as planned. His palm felt empty, and the treasure basin interface began to change. In the blink of an eye, the length, width, and height of the space in his consciousness had all doubled, and the volume had increased eightfold. Treasure basin function, storage space 12x 12x 12. Upgrade points needed, 4,000. Function, item replication 1. Upgrade points needed, 10,000. The points needed for the next upgrade doubled. Not stopping, Hayashi then picked up 4 gold bars to continue upgrading the space. Then 8 bars. 16 bars. Using a full 31,000 grams gold bars after 4 consecutive upgrades, the storage space had become treasure basin storage space 96x 96x 96. Upgrade points needed 32,000. Function item replication 1. Upgrade points needed 10,000. The area of the space had risen to over 9,000 square meters with a volume of nearly 900,000 cubic meters. It was equivalent to the size of a museum. Converted into standard containers, it was equivalent to the size of more than 29,000 containers stacked together. A space this large was sufficient for now. Now there were 91,000 grams gold bars and 3 500 grams bars left that could be upgraded. This time, Hayashi picked up 10 gold bars, his heart filled with anticipation. Upgrade item replication? As soon as he spoke, the gold bars in his hand disappeared. The numbers on the interface jumped rapidly until they stopped. Treasure basin storage space, 96x 96x 96. Upgrade points needed, 32,000. Function, item replication 4. Upgrade points needed, 20,000. The number of chances had truly increased, and it increased by 3 times all at once. This showed that as long as he continued to upgrade, he could gain more replication chances. Hayashi's eyes shone brightly. If he repeated this trick of buying gold from the bank a few more times, wouldn't he be able to upgrade the treasure basin infinitely? But he soon calmed down. Buying gold bars at the bank and selling them back is one thing. The first time, it can be passed off as a young man not knowing the ropes, losing a bit of money. Doing it again would inevitably invite suspicion. Secondly, replicated gold bars cannot be used for upgrades, and they are difficult to sell. Nowadays, every citizen's account in the empire is under state surveillance. A large influx of unexplained funds would quickly trigger an investigation by the relevant authorities. Aside from the original 25 million, any extra money simply cannot be exposed to the light. Not to mention spending it, he is upgrading the treasure basin to prepare for the coming of the extreme cold apocalypse. If he wastes precious time accumulating supplies just to upgrade the basin, that would completely go against his original intention. Moreover, after the apocalypse arrives, that will be the best time to collect gold. Within a month of the apocalypse, most of the world's plants and animals will die. Human food will become scarce, and by then, just a few loaves of bread will be enough to exchange for a 1-kilogram gold bar. No one will care about gold and jewelry when they are starving and freezing. After thinking it through, Hayashi placed his hands directly on all the remaining gold bars and continued to upgrade item replication. As the gold bars beneath his hands quickly disappeared, the numbers on the treasure basin interface continued to jump. Once the gold bars had completely vanished, the interface read, Treasure basin, storage space, 96x, 96x, 96. Upgrade points needed, 32,000. Function, item replication, 22. Upgrade points needed, 58,500. Hayashi was overjoyed, and a smile appeared on his face. Each upgrade doubles the number of uses obtained from the previous level, plus the remaining one. That equals 1 plus 3 plus 6 plus 12. A total of 22 replication chances. According to the current upgrade pattern, the next upgrade for item replication would grant him 24 chances, but that is a matter for after the apocalypse. The most important thing now is hoarding supplies. At this moment, Hayashi has 320,000 remaining on hand. He needs to sell the gold bar replicas he extracted from the bank to recoup his funds. Considering the gold just arrived today, Hayashi decided to wait 2 days before selling it at the bank. That would be safer. In the meantime, he would deal with the other batch of illicit gold. Hayashi first found a person in Sea City online, one of those shut-ins who spends his days idling away on mobile games. Using a reward of 20,000 as bait, he got him to go to a manufacturer of high-frequency heating equipment in the suburbs of Sea City to buy a small gold melting machine. Then, he found another person to go to a different factory to buy some crucibles. He then found a third person to buy molds. He instructed these 3 people to leave the items in 3 remote, low-surveillance areas, and only then did he disguise himself to go pick them up. He knew the authorities were certainly still watching him. Even if someone found out he bought these things, there was no evidence proving he had anything to do with the robbers. And by now, the Chukatori incident should be starting to ferment. He believed the authorities would be able to follow that thread to find the origin and motives of the robbers. Coupled with Hayashi being so careful, he wouldn't be suspected for a while. After taking the items back to the warehouse, Hayashi began his work. Melting, casting, forming. He fussed about until 3 in the morning, and the 61-kilogram gold bars were all processed into 180 bars of various sizes. Hayashi had already planned how to handle these gold bars. On the surface, it is a pawn shop, but in reality, there is a gang inside that traffics in all sorts of contraband. They buy everything and sell everything. Hayashi knows this because this pawn shop continues to exist after the apocalypse. It is said that someone once used a few hundred caddies of rice to exchange for a Type 54 pistol. Hayashi decided to take 5 kilograms of gold tomorrow to test the waters. If the rumors were true, he could also use these gold bars to exchange for cash. After putting the gold bars and tools into his space, Hayashi finished his work for the day and fell into a deep sleep. Hoo-hoo-hoo! With rhythmic breathing, Hayashi slowly stretched and extended his body, then suddenly struck out with a palm in the next second, before gently pulling it back. At times as still as a maiden, at others as swift as a rabbit. His movements flowed like moving clouds and flowing water. They were similar to Tai Chi, but with some differences. This is an exercise method designed by Empire scientists in his previous life to help humans survive better in the extreme cold. It requires a certain level of physical fitness before one can start practicing it. After a few days of basic training, Hayashi clearly felt his physical flexibility improve significantly, and his strength and endurance increased quite a bit. He began to try practicing this technique called resonance. In his previous life, scientists speculated that after the geomagnetic storm erupted, a magical substance appeared in the air amidst the changing Earth magnetic field. This substance could greatly improve biological constitution when absorbed. The evidence was that all the plants and animals that survived the first 3 years of the apocalypse began to mutate, with this mysterious substance present in their blood and muscles. Surviving animals grew larger and larger, and a small number of plants could grow in snow at dozens of degrees below zero. However, the change this substance had on humans was minimal. Aside from making humans more resistant to the cold, there seemed to be no other obvious changes. Thus, in the 6th year of the apocalypse, scientists and martial artists collaborated to research this exercise method. It was popularized among survivors in the 7th year of the apocalypse. This set of movements could accelerate the human body's absorption of this substance. In his previous life, after Hayashi practiced it for over a year, he could stay outdoors in the extreme cold for 2 or 3 hours without wearing a down jacket. At the time, he heard that some people in the military could reach the point of unlocking their genetic limits. He didn't know if it was true. As the routine finished, Hayashi felt his body burning hot. He took a shower, went out for a hearty breakfast, and drove toward the eastern suburbs. Hayashi drove to the eastern suburbs, searched for over an hour, and finally found the pawn shop next to an old apartment complex. Sincere Pawn Shop! The sign was clearly faded. The shop door was small and opaque. Hayashi pondered for a moment, took the pistol out of his space, checked the bullets, and put the gun into his inner jacket pocket. It's better to be safe than sorry. Carrying a bag pre-filled with 5 pounds of gold, he walked into the shop. Upon entering, his eyes were met with a giant screen featuring the character Pawn. Past the screen, a man was fiddling with something behind the counter, so focused that he didn't even notice Hayashi walking in. Knock! Knock! Hayashi went over and tapped on the counter. The man looked up and, seeing a new face, immediately showed a wary expression. It was only then that Hayashi saw what the man was holding: a crossbow. Its body was jet black, with sleek, tense lines. On the table, there was also an unmounted scope and some spare parts. From its general form, this was an interceptor crossbow produced in the Lighthouse country. This was a composite crossbow far more powerful than a pistol. It was said it could pierce an elephant's skull within 150 meters. Its firing rate was comparable to a pistol. It had high accuracy, was easy to operate, and could be disassembled at will. The sound was quieter than a pistol, and the bolts could be recycled. If he had such a crossbow in his previous life, he could almost walk sideways in the wilderness of the apocalypse. He really hadn't come to the wrong place. Noticing Hayashi's gaze, Kuroda pulled a cloth over the not yet assembled crossbow, although he didn't think the kid in front of him could tell what it was. Kuroda still offered an explanation. "My child likes to play with these toys. What can I do for you, young man?" Hayashi didn't expose him and took off the backpack from his back, placing it on the counter. He unzipped it to reveal the gold inside. Kuroda's eyes lit up, and he picked up a gold bar to examine it. "Selling or pawning? Cash or transfer?" "I want to exchange it for some things," Hayashi said. Hearing this, Kuroda put away his casual attitude and looked at Hayashi seriously. Most people wouldn't know he did exchanges here. Only regulars, or people introduced by regulars, knew to come here to exchange goods. Since the apocalypse hadn't arrived yet, Kuroda naturally hadn't opened his doors to everyone. "Who referred you? What are you looking for?" Kuroda asked. Hayashi avoided the main point. "Can that crossbow you just had be traded?" Kuroda scanned Hayashi up and down, seemingly judging his age, and said, "Do you even know what that is?" Hayashi was about to speak when the door behind him was pushed open again. Before seeing the person, he heard the voice, "Old Kuroda, has my shipment arrived?" A tall, robust man walked around the screen. Only then did he notice there was someone else inside. He immediately looked at Hayashi with vigilance. Kuroda said to the robust man, "The stuff is here. It's not assembled yet. Go wait inside. I have a deal to make first." Only then did the robust man notice the bag of gold on the counter. A flash of greed crossed his eyes. Seeing the robust man walk into the small door behind the counter, Kuroda continued, "What do you want to trade? Hurry up, I have other guests." "I want to trade for the interceptor crossbow on your counter, or an elite crossbow, or an infiltrator. Any of them will do. I need the accompanying bolts. I also want Type 54 pistol ammunition. The more, the better." Kuroda's pupils shrank and he looked at Hayashi seriously again. In their line of work, the most important thing is a keen eye. Kuroda could generally determine who was worth trading with and who wasn't after a few glances. He would never trade his goods with desperate thugs, lest he get dragged into trouble. Nor would he trade with ordinary people, as they wouldn't need his gear. He only traded with people who frequently traveled the borders or mercenaries. These people often risked their lives. Once they got the gear they wanted, they would only be grateful to him. Kuroda had been in business for many years, all relying on his own good judgment. But he was somewhat unsure when looking at Hayashi. At first glance, Hayashi looked like a student, and he thought he was just there to pawn something. Upon closer inspection, he found Hayashi's eyes to be calm and restrained. His body tense, his limbs apparently relaxed, but actually positioned for action at any moment. This kind of vigilance, Kuroda had only seen in old dogs who often walked on the edge of life and death. However, this young man's skin and hands did not resemble those who lived on the edge of death. There were no calluses on his hands, and there was no aura of a desperate thug about him. Yet, he could immediately tell that what he hadn't fully assembled was an interceptor crossbow. Kuroda was momentarily undecided. Eventually, Kuroda decided to trust his instinct. "Kid, what you want isn't enough with just this gold. As long as you have what I want, money isn't an issue." Kuroda nodded. "Follow me." Kuroda turned and pushed open the door behind the counter. The robust man from before seemed not to have gone far. Pushing the door open, he saw the robust man standing by the door. "Old Kuroda, why are you bringing this kid in here?" "Old Gold, wait for your stuff. I'll let this little brother choose first." It turned out this robust man was called Gold, and Hayashi felt the fierce aura on him. Gold glanced at Hayashi sideways, his tone contemptuous. "Old Kuroda, are you so short on money now that you take business from anyone? A kid whose hair isn't even fully grown. If you sell your stock to him, aren't you afraid your den will be raided in 2 days?" Kuroda narrowed his eyes slightly, his smile fading. "I know what I'm doing in my own affairs, so don't you bother blabbering on the sidelines." Hayashi mentally supplied the second half of the sentence for Kuroda. "I'm just afraid the business we've done for so many years will be ruined by this kid." Gold snorted unhappily, his eyes flashing with malice as he looked at Hayashi. Hayashi looked back at him calmly. When facing a fierce predator, one must appear calm and collected to avoid being treated as prey. Kuroda, no longer willing to argue, waved his hand, signaling Hayashi to follow. Following Kuroda through a pitch-black corridor, they arrived at another thick aluminum alloy door. Kuroda took out a key to open the door, reached out to grope the wall inside for a few seconds, and the lights inside the room flickered on. Hayashi saw rows of wooden shelves through the gap in the door. "Come in." Kuroda led the way into the room. Inside, there were indeed rows of wooden shelves from high to low, with wooden crates of different sizes placed on them, all sealed tight so it was impossible to see what was inside. Hayashi followed him to a row of shelves, and Kuroda took down a wooden crate, pulling out the iron nails with a screwdriver. Opening the crate, he removed the straw on top, and inside was indeed an unassembled Interceptor crossbow! This is the Interceptor! 200,000, no bargaining. Kuroda stared at Hayashi, not missing any trace of expression on his face. The opening price was high, but in case the young man in front of him didn't know the market, Hayashi didn't move and said with an unhappy expression, "A sniper rifle only costs a few tens of thousands, and you dare to sell me a crossbow for 200,000? I recall the Interceptor only goes for about $8,000 in the Lighthouse country. Give me a sincere price. I need quite a lot of things. I won't let you earn less." He still had many things to exchange for. He couldn't be slaughtered like a fat sheep. Old Kuroda laughed without the slightest bit of embarrassment on his face. "Where on earth did you pop out from?" Fine. I'll give you a trade price. 100,000. I had to pull a lot of strings to get this stuff in. I can't sell it at the Lighthouse country price. Hayashi reached out and indicated a number. 60,000, 90,000, no less. 65,000. Eventually, Hayashi negotiated it down to 80,000. For the accompanying bolts, Hayashi asked for 50. Since bolts can be recycled, Kuroda didn't have many in stock. Otherwise, Hayashi would have asked for more. Next was the Type 54 pistol ammunition. Hayashi took all of Kuroda's stock, 2,000 rounds. The stock here was quite complete. There was a dazzling array of thermal weapons, including various models of sniper rifles, and pistols. But besides the Type 54 pistol, Hayashi only asked for 2 AK-47s. Originally, Hayashi wanted a few Empire rifles, as he knew the Empire's rifles were world-renowned for resisting harsh environments. But Kuroda said that Empire firearms were too hard to acquire, and he couldn't get any. Hayashi didn't want any other thermal weapons. Precision firearms like sniper rifles would become scrap metal in the extreme cold apocalypse. In the extreme cold, due to the principle of thermal expansion and contraction, the resistance of firearm parts increases and gun oil becomes viscous. The more precise the firearm, the easier it is to jam. Some even crack in the extreme cold. The same went for sniper rifles, precision rifles, and some highly precise pistols. Conversely, simple and crude pistols like the Type 54 could barely be used. Not to mention the AK-47, which was originally capable of functioning in extremely harsh environments. However, even if they didn't jam, the service life of these guns would be greatly reduced, requiring maintenance after just a few shots. Otherwise, the moisture generated by the heating of the barrel in the extreme cold would quickly freeze the barrel. Snow could also easily fly into the barrel during a blizzard. Their role as a deterrent was far greater than their practicality. If it was just for self-defense, a pistol would barely suffice, as Hayashi had more than one. But for hunting or collecting supplies, cold weapons were better. The era of cold weapons would rise after the extreme cold apocalypse. Finally, Hayashi took a fancy to 3 Nepalese kukri knives and 3 daggers. When faced with the tong swords that Kuroda was trying to push, Hayashi declined. "I thought you young people liked these swords?" Kuroda muttered. Tang swords had indeed been very popular online these past few years. Although they are sharp, Tang swords are too straight and long. At extremely low temperatures, they easily fracture when colliding with hard objects or other weapons. Hayashi smiled without explaining and asked, "Do you accept pre-orders?" Kuroda said confidently, "Tell me whatever you want. I want the best military cold weather gear, matching cold weather boots, tactical gloves, and helmets. I want top tier, the most cold resistant ones. Can you get them?" "Helmets? Top tier? The most cold-resistant ones? Can you get them?" Kuroda's eyes widened. A top-tier military cold-weather combat suit consists of over a dozen layers inside and out, capable of enduring combat in environments of minus dozens of degrees. The price is not low. Each set costs at least over 100,000. Hayashi added a number at the end. "I want 50 sets, all made to my measurements." 50 sets? Kuroda's eyes went round with surprise. "Are you going to war? Is this kid that rich?" Hayashi blurted out a serious lie. "I'm planning to stay in Antarctica for a few years." Kuroda naturally didn't believe such ghost stories. But after hearing what Hayashi wanted next, he felt that maybe what Hayashi said was true. 5 night vision goggles, 20 military walkie-talkies, 20 individual integrated tents capable of withstanding low temperatures, 50 cold-resistant military sleeping bags. Also, get me a few more military crossbows like the Interceptor and get plenty of bolts. Give me as much Type 54 pistol ammunition as you can get. And Kuroda did a rough calculation. The value of these items already exceeded 10 million. To order so many things, you need to give me at least a 1 million deposit. I only accept cash or gold. Kuroda's request was reasonable. Hayashi nodded. I'll come back tonight. There were still many gold bars in the space, but he couldn't take them out directly. Hayashi left the pawn shop carrying the hiking bag Kuroda had given him. After Hayashi left, Kuroda continued assembling the crossbow for Akira's other client. Akira asked with hidden meaning, "Old Kuroda, is this sheep fat?" Old Akira, don't get any ideas about him. Kuroda actually spoke up for Hayashi. He couldn't read this young man and didn't want to cause trouble. Just now, when he asked for a deposit, the young man didn't hesitate at all. Someone who can easily produce so much cash or gold and buy so much equipment could absolutely not be an ordinary person. Most importantly, he had never seen such calmness and composure in a young man in his 20s. After hearing Kuroda's words, Akira fell silent, a gloomy look flashing in his eyes. Leaving the pawn shop and returning to the car, Hayashi made sure there was no surveillance nearby before putting the items into his space. After dinner, Hayashi took 5 gin, 2.5 kilograms of gold from the space, and went to Kuroda's pawn shop. At night, the already remote suburbs were even quieter. Hayashi went straight into the pawn shop and handed the gold bars to Kuroda to count. Kuroda checked the gold and said, "All right, just pay the balance when the goods arrive." Hayashi wasn't afraid of Akira running away. First, this person was famous in the apocalypse precisely for his good reputation. Although his prices were steep, he provided real goods once paid. Second, he couldn't use this gold anyway. If it were truly lost, it wouldn't be much of a loss to him. Hayashi turned to leave but was stopped by Kuroda. "Wait." Kuroda hesitated for a moment before saying cautiously, "Be careful at night." Hayashi was slightly startled, then immediately realized, why would he, a grown man, need to be careful at night? Naturally, he meant be careful of people. Someone was targeting him. The car drove along the somewhat quiet streets. Because he remained vigilant, Hayashi did not drive fast. Not long after, Hayashi braked. A row of nails appeared on the road ahead. Hayashi narrowed his eyes slightly. He shifted to reverse and stepped on the gas to back up. He retreated to the intersection he had just passed, quickly shifted gears and changed direction. This turn of events was completely unexpected by the people lying in ambush. Normal people would either have their tires punctured and be forced to repair them, or get out of the car to check the situation and sweep the nails aside. Who would turn around and run without a word? In an alley not far from where the nails were scattered, Akira, dressed in black and wearing a motorcycle helmet, saw this scene. Akira cursed with an international profanity and twisted the throttle to chase after Hayashi. Hayashi drove a few hundred meters, and the sound of a motorcycle engine came from behind. Through the rearview mirror, he saw the person behind dressed in black, wearing a helmet, making it impossible to see his face under the dim streetlights. Hayashi drove toward a remote road. The motorcycle followed closely behind Hayashi, only Akira's eyes were exposed through his helmet, fierce light gleaming in his murky eyes. He worked himself to the bone out there, risking his life, only earning a bit of blood money every few months. If he could kidnap this fat sheep and squeeze a few hundred or thousand out of him, he could live comfortably for a long time. These rich kids are the most afraid of death. As long as he used a few methods to threaten him and took some compromising photos, they would obediently pay to save their lives. Akira wasn't the first to do this, and he hadn't failed in previous attempts. Hayashi's lavish spending and youthful face gave Akira ideas. After driving through a residential area, Akira turned the throttle and rushed in front of Hayashi's car, blocking him beautifully. At the same time, he secretly gripped the dagger on his leg with his other hand. As long as Hayashi got out of the car, he could immediately subdue the kid. It was only 8 p.m., still very early. Although the suburbs were remote, there were still sporadic pedestrians in the distance. This was a time when it was easy for people to lose their guard. A normal rich kid would have already jumped out of the car cursing by now. The surveillance along the way had already been destroyed by Akira. If he was quick, he could kidnap the person and the car, and it would be hard for anyone to trace it to him. Unfortunately, Hayashi was not an ordinary young man, but a reborn survivor who had clawed his way through the apocalypse and seen the ugliest side of humanity. A fierce look flashed in Hayashi's eyes as he gripped the steering wheel. He stepped on the gas and drove straight at him. His speed, originally at 60 kilometers per hour, soared over 100. How many seconds does it take to cover 10+ meters at 100 kilometers per hour? In the next second, Akira's pupils shrank, wanting to dodge, but it was too late. A loud bang was followed by the muffled thud of a heavy object hitting the ground. Akira and his motorcycle were thrown over 10 meters by the massive impact. The front of the sedan was damaged beyond recognition. In the crash, shards of the headlights fell all over the ground, and the bumper was deeply dented. By comparison, Akira's motorcycle was even more severely damaged. Twisted motorcycle parts were scattered everywhere. The motorcycle, which was originally intended to keep him agile and facilitate a smooth escape, became the main reason for Akira's failure. If it were a sedan, Hayashi would have spent some effort driving to a deserted place before making a move. But since Akira blocked the way with a motorcycle asking for death, there was no need to worry about being quick and decisive. Hearing the loud noise, people in the distance started looking for the source, but because the distance was too great, they couldn't see anything. Hayashi calmly got out of the car and came to Akira's side. Akira, wearing his helmet, was still conscious. He was spitting blood, his limbs twisted unnaturally, and he stared at Hayashi with venomous eyes, but he couldn't speak a word. He had spent his whole life hunting geese, only to be pecked in the eye by a gosling. He didn't expect a young man who looked only 20 to be so ruthless. He didn't even know the reason, yet he dared to ram into him like that. Wasn't he afraid of hitting the wrong person? Hayashi walked to within a meter of Akira and whispered, "Isn't it strange why I dared to hit you?" Akira? Hayashi's calmness and indifference made Akira's pupils shrink. He had misjudged. The person in front of him wasn't a fat sheep at all, but a ruthless murderer just like him. Akira was still struggling in his final moments. The impact had completely broken Akira's left thigh. His left ribs had pierced his internal organs, and his right hand was twisted and deformed from slamming into the ground. He couldn't move. If he still had the strength to fight back, he would definitely kill this kid. Akira swore silently to himself that once he recovered, he would make Hayashi die in pieces. However, Hayashi didn't give him that chance. He crouched down, picked up a steel pipe that had fallen from the motorcycle, and plunged it into Akira's throat in front of his terrified eyes. Akira's eyeballs nearly popped out, his mouth gasping, and the fierce light in his eyes seemed like it wanted to dismember Hayashi. Even in death, Akira couldn't understand. He wouldn't even dare to kill someone in a place like this. So how did Hayashi dare? Hayashi whispered, "When I was driving over here just now, I saw that several surveillance cameras along the way were broken. You were the one who handled them, right? You were the one who handled them, right? Thanks for finding yourself a grave. HMPH. HMPH." Akira struggled to say something. However, having suffered a fatal wound, the luster in his eyes quickly faded. Hayashi's will shifted, and he put Akira's corpse, all the scattered fragments, and even his own car into the space. On the deserted road, when those who heard the noise arrived, they only saw a patch of blinding blood. Vigilant residents called the police, and the police extracted the blood, confirming it was human blood. But there was no evidence at the scene to prove that a homicide had occurred. All surveillance was destroyed, there was no victim, and there were no witnesses. The case couldn't even be opened and ended there. After walking a distance, Hayashi took a taxi home. This wasn't his first time killing someone, so naturally, there was nothing to fear. In the apocalypse, everyone is a hunter, and everyone is prey. He wasn't a good person. If someone dared to scheme against him, don't blame him for being ruthless. Hayashi returned to the warehouse, took a shower, and went to sleep. The next day, Hayashi checked the time. It was already March 7th, the 7th day since his rebirth. He checked the international gold price and found it had risen by 5 yuan in the past 2 days. So he decided to sell the gold bars today to cash out so he could continue with his next hoarding plan. After morning exercise and breakfast, Hayashi took a taxi to the bank. Hayashi had been a celebrity at the bank for the past 2 days. As soon as he walked into the bank with his suitcase, he was recognized. "Mr. Hayashi, what business can I help you with today?" Since the incident of Chukotori leaking client information was exposed by Hayashi, although the bank didn't make a fuss for the sake of its reputation, it had secretly fired Chukotori. Now Hayashi's customer manager was another man, about 30 years old, named Kenji. Kenji had bought a pack of cigarettes for his boss to earn the chance to serve Hayashi after realizing his, quote, potential. Kenji was busy with a credit card application for a client when he saw Hayashi, and his eyes lit up. Seeing the suitcase Hayashi was carrying, his eyes almost sparkled. This posture, this suitcase, wasn't it exactly the same as that day when Hayashi dropped $25 million to buy gold? At that time, when he heard that Chu Katori's client was buying $25 million in gold from her, he and other account managers were incredibly envious and jealous. He never expected such a windfall to come his way so soon. Kenji immediately abandoned the user he was serving for the credit card and had a colleague take over. Compared to the commission from selling $25 million in gold, what was the small commission of a credit card? Kenji quickly arrived in front of Hayashi, wearing his most sincere smile. "Hello, Mr. Hayashi. I am your new customer manager, Kenji. What business are you here for today?" Let's go inside to talk." "All right, this way, please." Kenji eagerly ushered Hayashi into the VIP room, soaking in the envious and jealous looks from his colleagues, feeling a bit proud in his heart. Hayashi spent $25 million on gold without blinking. He must have more deposits in other banks. If he could win those deposits over, his performance would skyrocket. The other bank staff members thought the same. To them, performance meant salary. Quality clients meant their livelihood. But Kenji had moved too fast. They could only curse him under their breath. "That scumbag!" Hayashi walked to the VIP window, just about to speak. Kenji rushed to say, "Mr. Hayashi, please have a seat for a moment." After saying that, he hurried away. Hayashi could only sit and wait. Soon, Kenji returned, holding an exquisite gift box. The bank prepares gifts for high-quality clients every year, sending different levels of gifts based on different tiers. The gift prepared for the highest-tier clients this year was 2 bottles of Mutai. Hayashi was not originally the bank's highest-tier client, but Kenji, in order to retain Hayashi as a big client, paid out of his own pocket to prepare a gift for him, as long as Hayashi completed one more large-scale wealth management transaction at the bank. See, he would not only break even, but also improve his performance, and his salary would rise rapidly. He had originally planned to call Hayashi in the next 2 days to have it delivered, but he didn't expect Hayashi to come in person. "Mr. Hayashi, this is this year's gift for you, and inside is also a personal gesture from me." Hayashi didn't pay much attention and nodded. He got straight to the point. "Help me handle the buyback procedure for the gold bars." After speaking, he opened the suitcase, revealing a full box of 60 kilograms of gold bars. Kenji froze. The expression on his face was extremely colorful. He confirmed again. "You mean you want to sell these gold bars back?" Hayashi nodded. Kenji took a look at today's international gold price and forced a smile, saying, "Mr. Hayashi, if you sell these gold bars now, you will be making a loss." Hayashi had already prepared an excuse on the way there. "I know. I've already checked. It was just a momentary impulse that I bought so many gold bars before. Now I realize that investing in gold isn't cost-effective, and I plan to invest this money elsewhere." Kenji tried to persuade him a few times, but it didn't change Hayashi's mind. Instead, Hayashi started to get impatient. Although Kenji was reluctant, he had no choice but to start the buyback process. Buyback procedures are much more troublesome than buying, as they need to verify the code on the certificate of each gold bar against the number on the bar itself, confirm the packaging isn't damaged, check that the bars aren't scratched, etc. It couldn't be finished in a moment. Kenji immediately called over a counter clerk to help him organize. When the clerk heard Hayashi was selling the gold bars he had just bought, he looked at Kenji with a bit of schadenfreude. Kenji's face turned even darker. He didn't get a cut of the commission when they were sold, but now he had to do all the labor for the buyback. If he didn't think Hayashi was a potential client, Kenji would have already been glaring daggers at him. It took the whole morning for all the gold bars to be bought back. Hayashi's account received $24.78 million, a loss of over $600,000. Goal achieved. Hayashi didn't care about that small amount of money. After refusing all of Kenji's wealth management programs, Kenji still forced a smile as he watched Hayashi leave with the 2 bottles of Mutai. He was filled with regret. He had paid over 1,000 yuan out of his own pocket for that gift, and spent a pack of cigarettes. What made Kenji even angrier was that for the next period of time, he would be laughed at by his colleagues behind his back as an idiot. Hayashi naturally wouldn't care about this. After leaving the bank, Hayashi went straight to the grain and oil wholesale market. Rice comes in 50 kilograms bags. Hayashi wanted 100 tons, 200 bags sif, 1,000 bags of flour, 100 boxes of cooking oil, 1,000 boxes of table salt. The reason Hayashi hoarded so much table salt is that after the seawater freezes, Extracting table salt will be 100 times more difficult than it is now. Salt is very cheap now and doesn't take up much space, so Hayashi hoarded plenty. Then 100 boxes each of MSG, chicken essence, soy sauce, vinegar, and other seasonings. Instant noodles, sausages, ham, luncheon meat, noodles, etc. 1,000 boxes each. For hot pot seasoning and various seasoning packets, Hayashi also wanted 100 boxes. Later, in the extreme cold, eating hot pot every day, that would be true enjoyment. Hayashi bought other miscellaneous items as he saw them. The total supplies purchased filled 7 container trucks. It cost Hayashi over $1 million. The bosses at the grain and oil wholesale market treated Hayashi like a procurement officer for a giant supermarket, driving prices down to the lowest, looking forward to Hayashi's next purchase. Loading these goods in the fastest time still took several hours. Hayashi requested that they send several more workers for loading and unloading. After paying the deposit and leaving the address, he headed to the nearby farmer's market. He ordered thousands of jin of various live fish, requesting that they all be gutted and scaled. He bought 1 to 2 tons each of chicken, duck, fresh pork, beef, lamb, and eggs. Since it was already afternoon, these could only be delivered tomorrow. In particular, because Hayashi requested the fish be killed on the spot, it cost an extra yuan per jin, and it would take several days to fulfill the entire order. After that, he bought hundreds of jin of dried seaweed, various dried seafood, ginger, green onions, and garlic. The space's time stasis property meant that items stayed exactly as they were when put inside. If it weren't for the fact that the space couldn't hold living things, Hayashi would have prepared some fresh shrimp and crabs. Hayashi then pre-ordered 3 tons of various vegetables, melons, and fruits, asking them to be delivered early the next morning. Next, Hayashi ran to the pharmacy to start buying medicine. Unlike food, there is a limit to how much an individual can buy. Hayashi ran until evening, visiting over a dozen pharmacies, before he managed to buy 50 boxes of antibiotics, 72 boxes of cold medicine, and various antiviral sachets and oral liquids. For the 100-count bottles of vitamins that cost 2 yuan each, Hayashi bought 126 bottles. But this was still not enough. Medicine is extremely scarce in the apocalypse. In extreme cold, a single cold could cost a person their life. Hayashi planned to place more orders online. The first batch of goods from the grain and oil wholesale market had already arrived near the warehouse Hayashi had rented. After receiving the call, Hayashi drove back. Just as he arrived at the warehouse entrance, his phone rang again. It was a call from Hiroshi. Calculating the time, Hiroshi had already been in Sashi for 4 days. It seemed he had made progress. Hayashi answered the phone. Hiroshi's voice came through the line. "Boss, I've walked all over Sashi these past few days and found 3 locations that fit your requirements perfectly. I've sent the detailed information to your WeChat. Please take a look." "All right, I'm busy right now. I'll call you back later." Hayashi first opened the warehouse door and worked with over a dozen moving workers to unload the cargo. It took more than 3 hours to unload the 7 containers and store the goods in the warehouse. After the workers left, Hayashi placed his hand on the pile of supplies and moved them all into the space. Looking at the supplies that took up only a fraction of the space, Hayashi knew this was just the beginning. After taking a shower, Hayashi reviewed the information Hiroshi had sent. He had to admit he hadn't misjudged his choice. All 3 places in the data were perfect for his needs. High elevation, remote, and no tall buildings around, allowing for construction at any time. One of the locations was particularly open, situated in the eastern suburbs of Sashi. Not to mention building a private sanctuary would be more than enough to build an entire residential complex. Hayashi suspected that the official sanctuary from his past life had been built on this very spot. If that were the case, and it was requisitioned by the authorities later, his losses would be huge, so he dismissed this location. That left 2 places. One was behind a village in the western suburbs, with a hill only about 10 meters high, located over 10 kilometers away from the first clearing. There used to be a Taoist temple on the mountain. Although the temple had collapsed, the foundation remained. The last place was in a fishing village named West Island, along the coast of Sashi. There was a cliff over 10 meters high in the village, and on top of it was a spacious piece of residential land where a few families used to live before they moved away. Hayashi sent a text message to Hiroshi, asking him to find someone to survey the mountain with the temple and the cliff to check the geology. He didn't want the house foundation to collapse while he was living there. Although cliffs are made of rock layers, year-round exposure to wind and waves could cause the rock to weather, making it unsuitable for building a sanctuary. By comparison, the hill that used to be a Taoist temple better fit his ideal. However, he would have to wait for the results. After finishing these tasks, Hayashi fell asleep. Over the next 3 days, the items delivered to the warehouse were the fresh produce Hayashi had bought at the farmer's market. Hayashi hired 4 people nearby to receive and move the cargo into the warehouse. On the 8th, he ran to the timber market. After the extreme cold, while humanity lost electricity, natural gas pipelines worldwide were frozen and leaking. Humanity had an extreme need for fire sources. Without fire, they could not eat cooked food or warm meals, and most survivors lived by eating raw meat and blood. Countless people also froze to death in their sleep due to the cold. Therefore, wood also became incredibly precious. Hayashi bought 500 tons of firewood directly. Firewood was much cheaper than ordinary lumber, consisting of scrap wood and offcuts. Just this much wood required 25 containers to ship. Luckily, Hayashi had ordered a large amount, or the timber market wouldn't have been willing to load and unload it for him. Then came gas canisters and coal. Hayashi bought as much as he could, purchasing 800 tons of coal. Immediately after, he bought windproof lighters, fire starters, windproof matches, and so on. He also placed orders online for cold medicine, antibiotics, disinfectant, emergency bandages, and other medical supplies. There were also respirators, oxygen tanks, tactical axes, jungle knives, blast-proof suits, and other survival gear. On the 9th, Hayashi went to the largest generator factory in Haishi, buying 10 portable generators, 10 household generators, and 2 industrial-grade generators. Except for the industrial generators, he chose the quietest gasoline generators for everything else. Industrial generators were only for backup when massive power was needed, using diesel. Under normal circumstances, household generators were enough. Next was electrical wire. After the extreme cold apocalypse, even if circuits weren't destroyed by electromagnetic storms, wires exposed outdoors were basically frozen and broken. Therefore, Hayashi had already decided to run wires indoors, allowing the sanctuary's power to form a self-contained loop. To avoid power outages caused by aging or short circuits, Hayashi bought tens of thousands of meters of various wires as backup. Then came diesel and gasoline. To use generators, he had to stockpile diesel and gasoline. However, the private sale of petroleum is prohibited. If he used the method of filling up a tank and siphoning it out, he didn't know how long it would take to gather enough. So Hayashi visited the Changshin pawn shop again. "You want 100 tons of diesel? 100 tons of gasoline? Do you think I run a gas station?" Kenji looked at Hayashi with an "are you kidding me" expression. Hayashi smiled bitterly. 100 tons wasn't much at all. A single large SUV fuel tank holds 100 liters, and filling it 10 times is a ton. Stockpiling goods naturally meant hoarding as much as possible. No one knew when the apocalypse would end. At the very least, by the 8th year of the extreme cold, there were no signs of it ending. If even Kenji couldn't manage it, he would have no choice but to buy a car with a large enough tank and collect it from different gas stations. Just as Hayashi was about to leave, Kenji pondered for a moment and said, "However, I can get you up to 10 tons. A flash of joy appeared in Hayashi's eyes. Noticing Kenji's probing gaze, he quickly suppressed his joy. "What's the price? 10 tons of gasoline and 10 tons of diesel for 2 kilograms of gold? 2 kilograms of gold was over 800,000? Good grief. The price of diesel is less than 10,000 per ton, and gasoline is over 10,000 per ton. Even at 10 tons each, that's only over 200,000. Kenji had directly raised the price more than fourfold. "Don't complain about the price. I don't normally deal in this, and I'm taking a big risk. If you don't want it, that's fine," Kenji said. Hayashi was naturally not one to be pushed around. He still had some copies of gold bars in his space, but he had to be the one to decide the trade terms. 20 tons of gasoline and 20 tons of diesel, and I'll give you 5 kilograms of gold. Fortune favors the bold? Kenji gritted his teeth and agreed. Seeing Kenji agree so readily, Hayashi's eyes flickered and he asked, "Can you get me some medicine? Price is negotiable. Tell me, what exactly are you preparing all these things for?" Hayashi's requested items were becoming increasingly strange. Although asking about a customer's purpose is a taboo, he was truly too curious. Cold weapons, cold weather clothing, oil, and medicine. What was this for? Could it be that, just as this young man said, he was going to settle in Antarctica? Kenji began to consider this mind-boggling possibility. Hayashi naturally wouldn't reveal his true purpose. "Didn't I tell you? I'm going to settle in Antarctica." Next, Hayashi gave Kenji a list of antibiotics, cold medicine, and trauma medication. Kenji was half convinced but agreed on the price with Hayashi. Leaving the pawn shop, Hayashi thought for a moment and decided to go to the electronics market first to buy some appliances. In the apocalypse, he would need them for many years, so he had to buy several of each essential appliance. Soon, Hayashi arrived at the largest electronics mall in Haishi. Entering the mall, he bought 20 of everything: rice cookers, induction cookers, washing machines, dryers, hair dryers, air purifiers, and electric kettles. He bought 30 of each for electric heaters, electric blankets, fan heaters, and water filters. Next, he went to a nearby store to buy pots, bowls, and ladles, all of which had to be alloy or stainless steel. On the 10th, Hayashi went to the largest shopping mall in Haishi. Although he already had cold weather clothing, that was for when he went out hunting for supplies. Hayashi still needed to buy some everyday clothes and other thermal goods. He first went to a home goods store and bought 20 sets of down comforters, 20 sets of cotton quilts, 20 wool blankets, and 20 sets of bedding. Then he went to a well-regarded brand store. The down jackets and climbing gear at this store were said to be used by the Antarctic research team. They were made of the highest tech insulation materials currently available, with insulation performance second only to military-grade anti-cold clothing. It was almost spring, so all winter gear was on sale. Most of the items hanging on the shelves had been replaced with spring styles. Hayashi walked to the winter clothing section to choose. 2 sales assistants were chatting in the store. Since this brand sold high-end products, with each jacket costing several thousand or even 10,000, few people usually came in. Seeing Hayashi head straight for the clearance section as soon as he arrived, both sales assistants showed dismissive expressions and kept chatting to themselves. Hayashi watched for a while, and unable to tell which one was the warmest, he asked the sales assistant which of these is the warmest. The sales assistant, who had her back to Hayashi, rolled her eyes, turned to Hayashi and said, "These down jackets and climbing jackets are all quite warm." This was naturally not the answer Hayashi wanted. "I'm asking which one is the warmest, one that can keep me warm even at minus 50 degrees. The sales assistant cursed inwardly at the lunatic and came over, pointing randomly at a few pieces. Hayashi pointed to one of the ones the assistant had indicated. "Get me an XL size and I'll try it on." The sales assistant was already losing patience. Poor ghosts buying clearance goods have so many demands. The assistant looked at the down jacket on the rack. It was a size L. "Try this one first, and if you like it, I'll get you the other one." At this moment, Hayashi could feel the assistant's obvious impatience. His brow furrowed slightly, and he was just about to lose his temper when 2 people walked into the store. It was actually Akemi, accompanied by a tall, thin man named Ren. It looked like they were regular customers. The other sales assistant welcomed them with a face full of joy. "Hello, Mr. Sato. We've just got a lot of new arrivals. Please take a look." This attitude contrasted sharply with the sullen sales assistant by Hayashi's side. Especially seeing her colleague about to get another big commission, the face of the assistant next to Hayashi darkened even more. At this time, Akemi also saw Hayashi and spoke up. "Hayashi, you're here too?" Hayashi just nodded and stopped looking at her, asking the assistant to get him the XL size. The assistant went off, looking unwilling. Seeing Akemi staring at Hayashi, Ren, who had come with Akemi, was not pleased. "Akemi, who is that?" Akemi seemed to just snap out of it. "He's my high school classmate." Although Hayashi had abandoned the 3 of them at the club last time, Akemi always felt that it was Kenzo who offended Hayashi and caused him to take his anger out on them. Hayashi was rich and good-looking. In Akemi's dictionary, a man who is both handsome and rich deserves to be forgiven no matter what he does. The incident where Hayashi was kidnapped by robbers at the bank had long since spread among the classmates. Also spreading was the news of Hayashi buying 25 million in gold bars at the bank. Everyone felt that a person capable of buying 25 million in gold for investment must have a family fortune of at least nearly 100 million. Akemi's eyes were shining as she looked at Hayashi. The sales assistant brought the clothes Hayashi wanted, and he took off his coat and put them on. Akemi took a few more looks at Hayashi and discovered that his physique had somehow become even better, and under his thin undershirt, his pectoral muscles were vaguely visible. This made Akemi's face blush uncontrollably. Akemi glanced at the thin, scrawny Ren next to her and immediately felt that Hayashi was more suitable for her. She walked to Hayashi's side and praised. "Hayashi, you look really good in this jacket." Ren's expression darkened. Hayashi nodded, pointed to the few pieces the assistant had mentioned earlier, and said to the assistant, "Get those in